Introduction. The crow's synchronicity, the inescapable calling. Stop your hand. Stop your breath for a single moment. Do not look away nor pass by believing that your trivial will has brought you here. You believe in the blindness of your monotonous days that your hand has moved out of pure boredom, seeking a fleeting pastime to numb the emptiness that throbs in your chest. But in the vast and dark fabric of existence, chance is only the excuse of cowards and the consolation of the ignorant. What ordinary men call coincidence, the ancient initiates recognized as the unshakable law of the vibratory echo. The world you step on is not a chaotic stage. It is an immense and silent ocean of forces. It is an immense and silent ocean of invisible forces that responds with terrifying precision to the silent cry of your own consciousness. If this message, if this forbidden title has appeared before your eyes at this precise millisecond of your life, it is because your soul emitted a signal of desperation or of absolute hunger. You asked for a way out. You demanded an answer that the masses could never give you. The universe, in its cold and mathematical obedience, has simply moved the threads of fate, using the mirages of this plane to put this naked truth exactly in your path. It is not a suggestion. It is an inescapable calling. You have been summoned. What you are about to hear is not docile philosophy to comfort the weak, nor empty hope for those who enjoy their role as victims. This is the knowledge reserved for the few, the hidden doctrine that has been guarded in the shadows to protect it from the profanation of the mediocre. By hearing these words, you are crossing a threshold. You are crossing a dark threshold from which there is no possible return. If you decide to leave now, you can go back to your leaden sleep and pretend you were never here. But if you decide to stay and allow this voice to penetrate the halls of your mind, you must know that you are signing an irrevocable contract with your own destiny. Ignorance will cease to be your protective shield. Once the veil is torn away and you contemplate the nakedness of the laws that govern the material world, you will be condemned to the responsibility of greatness. Assume the consequences. The crow of synchronicity has croaked at the window of your spirit. The heavy door of initiation has opened wide. Enter if you dare. Chapter 1. The leakage of attention and the forge of radioactive magnetism. Where your gaze rests, there flows your spiritual blood. The world is a feast of thirsty shadows waiting for you to give them the breath of your life in exchange for a moment of empty entertainment. Ancestral wisdom. There is a silent, perpetual and devastating robbery being executed in broad daylight, before the eyes of all humanity. From the moment the sun rises on the horizon until the night covers the fields, ordinary men and women walk through life with the veins of their spirit wide open, bleeding drop by drop in the streets, in the squares, and in the intimacy of their own chambers. It is not a shedding of physical blood, nor a theft of silver coins. It is a plunder. It is a much deeper and more definitive looting. It is the vampirism of vital energy, the relentless flight of attention. Civilization has been indoctrinated to believe that attention is a simple cognitive process, a mechanical function of the brain that allows us to focus our sight or hear a sound. We are taught to watch foreign tragedies. We are taught that listening to the herd's gossip or consuming the world's scandals are harmless acts, simple pastimes to kill the boredom of dead hours. This is the most colossal and poisonous lie ever conceived to keep humanity on its knees. In the sanctuaries of forbidden knowledge, mental alchemy dictates an iron law that makes men tremble. The law is, attention is not a passive act. Attention is a literal, dense and quantifiable emanation of creative force. It is the prana of the Eastern sages, the vril of the initiates, the fluid of the ether. Your attention is the conduit through which your soul feeds matter. That on which you rest your gaze receives your immortality. That on which you stop your ears, and that to which you give the focus of your mind, instantaneously receives a direct transfusion of your own immortality. In this chapter, we are going to close the wounds through which your power escapes. You will learn to recognize the maws of the outside world that feed on your energy. Mastery is near. You will master the cruel and necessary art of tactical apathy. You will discover that, by sealing the fissures of your attention, vital energy will accumulate inside you until you become a radioactive colossus, endowed with a magnetism capable of bending the will of the earth without moving a single muscle. The forge begins now. The parable of the lotus pond. To illustrate the blindness of the man who wastes his vital energy, we must travel to the ancient teachings of the desert monks, who knew the absolute value of silence and containment. Old scrolls tell that in the center of a remote oasis lived a hermit in care of a sacred pond. Its waters were not common, they were pure and crystalline. They possessed the virtue of making the most beautiful and fragrant lotuses bloom. The beauty of the flowers granted unshakable peace to whoever contemplated them. The secret of the pond resided in its depth and its stillness. It was fed by a small and fragile underground spring, but the hermit had built a perfect stone wall around it. Not a single drop of water escaped into the desert. All the energy of the spring accumulated in the center, creating the pressure necessary to sustain the life of the lotuses. One day, a young traveler arrived at the oasis. Seeing the beauty of the pond, he felt the impulsive desire to share that water with the rest of the world. The hermit warned him that the water of the sacred spring was limited, and that its purpose was to nourish the flowers of inner wisdom, not to water the sterile sands of the outside. But the young man, moved by a false compassion and constant restlessness, ignored the elder. He took a chisel and began to make small fissures in the stone wall. He opened a crack for a thread of water to run towards some dry brambles. Then he opened another fissure to wet the dust of the road, believing that this would appease the heat. Later, he opened another hole to feed the insects that passed by. At first, it seemed that the pond had plenty of water. The young man felt proud of his generosity. However, weeks later, the underground spring could not compensate for the multiple leaks. The water level in the pond began to drop dramatically. The pressure vanished. The mud at the bottom was exposed to the scorching sun, and the magic lotuses, deprived of the volume of water necessary to sustain their stems, withered, dried up, and died. When the young man returned to contemplate the oasis, he found no flowers or peace. He only found a hole of dry mud, and those brambles, roads, and insects to which he had given the water remained exactly the same. Sterile brambles, dry dust, and ephemeral creatures that returned not even a shadow of gratitude. He had destroyed the source. Terse, the feast of fools and the invisible bleeding. Observe with terror and lucidity how you repeat, day after day, the tragedy of that young traveler. Your physical body houses an underground spring of inexhaustible creative energy, but of a precise flow. That energy has been given to you with a single divine purpose, to make the lotus of your own greatness bloom and to forge your empire. It is given to elevate your consciousness and endow you with a magnetic gravity that orders your own universe. But instead of building a wall of silence and containment around your mind, you take the chisel of morbid curiosity and begin to open cracks in the fortress of your skull. You wake up in the morning and open the gates of attention. Before having cultivated your own spirit, you open the floodgates of your attention to the tragedies of the world. You pour your vital energy onto the news of distant wars you cannot stop, onto the crimes of the city, onto the scandals of men and women whose lives lack all nobility. You hand over your flow of ether to empty entertainment. You hand it to the noise of the market and the miserable opinions of those who live in the mud. You believe you are only observing, but in the realm of Hermeticism, to observe is to feed. That which you look at, you nourish with your own life. The material universe is a hungry kingdom. Tragic events and social dramas are the dry brambles. They are etheric parasites that lack their own light, and to exist, to stay alive in the collective consciousness, they need to feed on the emotional reaction and sustained attention of millions of voluntary slaves. Every time you feel indignation at a corrupt ruler, you are sending a ray of your pure energy directly to that system. Your anger does not weaken them. Your anger is a tribute, a succulent delicacy that makes them stronger, because you have given them your valuable attention. Every time you listen to the poisonous gossip of a peer and immerse yourself in the judgment of another's life, you have just opened a fissure in your sacred pond. You lose your will. The vampirism of the ether does not require that creatures of the night bite your neck. It only requires that they keep you distracted. While your attention is fragmented in 1,000 different directions, worried about public opinion, fearful of global disasters, You will never have the internal pressure necessary to materialize power. You are a giant bleeding from 1,000 tiny cuts, stumbling from fatigue before noon, wondering why life is so heavy and why your projects of wealth and nobility never bloom. They do not bloom because there is no water in the pond. You have given it all to the pigs. The leak must stop now if you wish to reclaim your throne and your light. Thread the anatomy of the parasite, the world as distraction. To seal the fissures, you must first look the parasite in the eye and understand its intrinsic nature. The outside world, in its mundane conformation, is a spectacle designed to keep you in a state of hypnosis. The existence of the masses is dominated by what the ancient occultists called the larvae of the astral. These are real forces. These are not mythical creatures of horror stories. They are energetic formations created by collective fear, anxiety, and morbidity. These forces operate through the whispers of people, the media, and manufactured crises. Their only goal is to prevent you from looking inward. They know that if man discovers his power, they lose control. A man who is the master of his own attention is a man impossible to govern, impossible to frighten, and impossible to squeeze. Therefore, the system demands your constant emotional reaction. It throws poisoned hooks at you. It tells you that you must be informed to be a good citizen. It tells you to involve yourself in foreign tragedies. The outside world demands loyalty to shared misery. Rejecting this pact is the first act of true alchemical rebellion. The sovereign understands that his greatest act of mercy and love toward the universe is not bleeding while crying for the tragedies of the world, but becoming a beacon of unshakable power. A beacon stands firm in the rock. A lighthouse does not run back and forth trying to save ships from drowning. A lighthouse plants itself firmly on the rock, accumulates all its fire in the center of its tower, and shines with such intensity that the ships find the way on their own. You do not serve humanity by being a bleeding slave. Your only sacred duty is to your fire. Octave, the art of tactical apathy and the closing of the gates. We thus arrive at the sharpest and most ruthless tool in the initiate's arsenal, tactical apathy. In the morality of the weak, apathy is a sin. They tell you that not caring about anything is a symptom of selfishness and coldness. But on the path of power, selective apathy is the warrior's shield. It is the ability to ignore the chaos. It is the capacity to look at the drama, the provocation and the din of the outside world, and decide with mathematical coldness to deny them access to the sacred chamber of your consciousness. To execute tactical apathy, you must become a jealous and tyrannical guardian of the gates of your mind. You must institute an obsidian filter. From this moment on, you must institute an obsidian filter between your eyes and the world. Every time information, a conversation, or an event tries to capture your gaze, you must subject it to the guillotine of an unnegotiable question. Does this elevate my empire, purify my spirit, or multiply my wealth? Or is it simply a thief? If the answer is that it is a thief who comes to steal your breath, the sentence must be immediate and absolute. You do not debate with distraction. You do not justify yourself. You simply withdraw your attention, like one who turns his gaze away from a stone in the road. Let men discuss the political climate. You will keep your silence. Let your acquaintances crawl in the mud of jealousy and mutual resentment. When they come to tell you their poison, you will stand up and leave the room without giving explanations. Let the news announce the end of the world every dawn. Your world will not end, because the keys to your destiny do not reside on the outside. You are free. The act of violently withdrawing your attention from the mundane produces a shock in your environment. At first, people will call you arrogant. They will say you have become inaccessible, distant, and cold. The parasite will writhe with hunger and bang on your walls, demanding that you return the food of your emotions. Endure that pressure. Enjoy the offense of the weak. Their anger is the undeniable proof that you have ceased to be their prey. You have sealed the fissures of your pond. The water of your life no longer spills onto the dead sands. You are accumulating the pressure necessary for true creation. The silence is your fortress, and your focus is your greatest weapon. Fear the accumulation of vril and the pressure of the forge. What happens when a mighty river is stopped by an immense concrete dam? The water, which before was dispersed gently across the plain, begins to accumulate. Its level rises inexorably. Its weight multiplies by millions of tons, and that accumulated pressure, when channeled through the correct turbines, is capable of lighting nations. This is the exact physics of contained attention. When you spend days, weeks, and months applying tactical apathy, when you stop spilling your energy in anger, idle lust, gossip, and fear, the vril, your vital energy, has nowhere to escape. The force that was once dissipated now crashes against the sealed walls of your own consciousness. The energy returns toward the center. It accumulates in your chest. It descends toward your belly. Your physical body becomes a high-pressure furnace. In esoteric texts, this process is called the condensation of the aura. At first, you will feel this accumulation as physical discomfort. You will feel a strange heat in your entrails. You will feel a nervous energy that struggles to get out. Your ego, addicted to bleeding, will beg you to turn on a screen, to seek a conflict, or to seek someone's approval to open the escape valve and relieve the pressure. The mandate of alchemy is, endure the burn. Do not open the valve. You must tame that wild force and make it stay. You must force it to remain within the cauldron of your own being. Sit in absolute silence. Close your eyes and breathe, forcing that accumulated energy to circulate through your spine, nourishing your cells, hardening your will, and expanding the limits of your consciousness. When you keep your energy sealed, your vibration changes state. You cease to be a porous and light body, dragged by any current of air, to become a mass of immeasurable gravity. Your being becomes dense, dark, and brilliant like hematite. You have stopped giving your strength to the external illusion and have forged it on the anvil of your own throne. The pressure is the secret of your future sovereignty. As the irradiation of the initiate, the radioactive magnetism. It is in this state of divine pressurization where the most terrifying and fascinating phenomenon a human being can experience occurs, the birth of radioactive magnetism. When a man or woman needs nothing from the outside world, when they do not seek to be looked at, when they do not beg to be heard, their presence becomes lethal. When your attention rests with absolute weight upon your own center, your presence becomes lethally magnetic. Like the sun that does not need to approach the planets because its immense gravitational mass forces them to revolve around it, the initiate who has accumulated his ether alters the physics of any room they enter. It is natural. You no longer need to force your charisma. You do not need to speak loudly to dominate a meeting. You enter in silence with the calm gaze of one whose pond is overflowing with life inside, and the atmosphere densifies. The scattered, bleeding, and weak minds of those around you instinctively detect the immensity of your contained power. They feel the heat of your forge. They perceive at the most primitive level of their being that they are before a colossus who possesses the energy they lack, and without knowing why, they surrender to your will. They offer you their resources. They open armored doors for you, and they give you the gold of their chests. They are enchanted. They are bewitched by the gravitational force of a soul that has learned the art of absolute containment. Your gaze becomes a weapon of millimetric precision. Since all your attention has been concentrated, the day you decide voluntarily and tactically to rest your gaze on an objective, the laser beam of your consciousness pulverizes. It pulverizes any obstacle in fractions of seconds. Matter melts before the intensity of your focus, because there are no fissures through which the heat escapes. All the abundance, all the mystery, and all the majesty of existence bend before the man who knows how to keep silent. Your focused gaze is now a command to the very fabric of reality. Take awareness at this very moment of the open sores through which you are pouring the blood of your spirit. Recognize the vampires around you, not with hate, for hate is also a leak of energy, but with the cold and absolute indifference of the king who closes the doors of his palace to beggars in the middle of the night. It is over. The era of giving away your immortality in exchange for the trinkets of entertainment has ended. Reclaim the command of your eyes. Reclaim the empire of your ears. Demand with a sacred cruelty that everything that demands your attention pays the tribute corresponding to the presence of a sovereign. If the world offers no beauty, ignore it. If the outside world does not offer you beauty, undeniable truth, or expansive power, offer it in exchange the tomb of your most sepulchral silence. Seal the cracks of the pond. Let the water accumulate until the walls of your body tremble under the weight of infinite power. Cultivate the lotus of greatness in the strictest solitude. And when the vessel of your attention is full to the brim, dense and radioactive, stand up. Walk among the shadows of the world, not as a frightened prey, but as the inexhaustible pit of gravity to which all the riches of the earth will be forced to precipitate. The world is now your stage, and your silence is the conductor of its new rhythm. Chapter 2. The Empire of Silence, the Law of Concealment and the Forging of Greatness in the Dark. To know, to dare, to will, and to keep silent. The first three pillars raise the temple of greatness, but it is the fourth, the unshakable silence, the stone vault that holds the weight of the gods. If the silence is broken, the entire temple collapses upon the builder's head. The Codex of the Black Flame. There is a tragic weakness, a vulgar and pestilential vice that condemns the vast majority of the human race to perpetual mediocrity. It is not the lack of intelligence, nor the scarcity of opportunities, nor the absence of an initial will. It is a disease that dwells in the tongue. It is the hysterical, desperate, and infantile need to speak. It is the need to speak before the time. Observe the inertial man when a spark of inspiration touches his spirit, when he conceives a plan of conquest, when he decides to forge a commercial empire, transform his body, or claim an elusive love. A sacred fire is lit within him. That spark grants him a strength he did not know he possessed at all. But instead of taking that incandescent ember, swallowing it, keeping it in the center of his chest and using its heat to feed the motor of his will, the weak man runs to the public squares. He runs to find his friends, his family, his tavern colleagues, and he opens his mouth. He speaks of his plans with exaggerated and loud eloquence. He describes the castle he is going to build with an astonishing luxury of detail. He announces his victories before having wielded the sword. And while he speaks, while he receives the pats on the back and the looks of false admiration from those who listen to him, he does not realize that he is committing a true alchemical suicide. He does not perceive that with every syllable that leaves his lips, the sacred fire escapes, cools and dissipates into the dead air of the outside world. Weeks later, that brilliant man finds himself paralyzed, void of energy, without understanding why his motivation has disappeared and why his great project is just a castle of smoke. In the mysteries of hidden metaphysics, the supreme law of materialization demands a discipline that terrifies the vain ego, the law of concealment. Every birth, every colossal creation demands the womb of darkness and the protection of absolute silence. In this chapter, you will learn to sew your lips, you will discover the physics, you will discover the esoteric physics of hermetic pressure, and understand why revealing your intentions is handing over the keys of your destiny to the thieves of the ether. You are going to stop being the jester who announces his tricks to become the silent sovereign who, without prior warning, shakes the foundations of the entire earth. The parable of the alchemical crucible. To understand the violence with which the world destroys that which is exposed before its time, we must descend to the damp basements of old Prague, where the true masters of transmutation guarded the secrets of fire and metals. The heavy tomes of tradition tell that there existed an alchemist master of immense and very unique power. He took under his wing a young apprentice of a brilliant mind but a vain spirit. For years the master taught him the secrets of proportions, the purification of lead, and the mysteries of the continuous fire. The day arrived when they had to execute the great work. The transmutation of dross into pure gold. The master prepared the matter. The master introduced the matter into a heavy crucible of iron and lead and sealed it with the mythical seal of Hermes, ensuring that not even the smallest slit allowed the passage of air. They placed the crucible inside the Athanor, the sacred furnace, and lit the flames. The master's mandate was severe. The fire must burn for 40 days. The crucible must remain sealed in the heat of the shadows. If the seal is broken before the sun rises on the morning of the 40th day, the volatile essence will escape, the cold of the world will profane the chamber, and the matter will rot forever. After giving the order, the old master left for the mountains to meditate in peace. He left the apprentice in charge of feeding the fire. During the first 30 days, the young man fulfilled his labor with devotion. The pressure inside the furnace was immense. The crucible vibrated and emitted a dull hum, a song of latent power that announced the miracle brewing inside. But on the 39th day, vanity ate his will. Knowing that the next day he would become the owner of an incalculable treasure and a renowned mage, he could not bear the weight of his own secret. He wanted to see the admiration in the eyes of his old companions. He wanted to be crowned as a genius before the work was finished. That night the apprentice invited 3 of his friends. He brought them to the basement, bragged of his wisdom, and to prove he was not lying, he took heavy iron tongs. Ignoring the supreme law, he broke the seal of Hermes and slightly opened the lid of the glowing crucible so his friends could see the radiance of the transmuted matter. In that exact instant, the cold air penetrated the chamber. There was no grand explosion. Only an agonizing hiss was heard, like the sigh of a ghost escaping into the shadows. The red and golden glow that illuminated the bottom of the crucible went out suddenly, swallowed by an instantaneous darkness. When the master returned at dawn on the 40th day and saw the broken seal, he did not shout. He walked to the furnace, tipped the crucible onto the stone table, and instead of the dazzling gold that should have crowned the great work, only a pile of grey, cold, putrid and useless dross fell out. The old man looked into the terrified eyes of the apprentice, and with a coldness that froze the blood dictated his final sentence. Gold is forged only in the cloister of secrecy. The open mouth is the freezing wind of ruin. You have traded the empire of kings for the ephemeral wonder of beggars. You are banished. The lesson was final. The apprentice lost everything for a moment of vanity. Silence is the only way to protect the gold of your soul from the cold world. Through the physics of hermetic pressure. You are the Athanor, and your great purposes are the matter inside the crucible. In the science of the invisible, all creation obeys the law of hermetic pressure. Observe the strength of water vapor. If you heat water in an uncovered vessel, the liquid transforms into a harmless cloud of steam that floats lazily and dissipates away. It dissipates without leaving a trace, unable to move even a feather. But if you lock that same amount of water in a hermetically sealed steel boiler and apply the fire of your will, the steam, finding no way out, begins to accumulate a colossal, brutal, indomitable pressure. That pressure can drag a train of 1,000 tons through mountains. The creative intention that is born in your spirit possesses exactly the same volatile nature as steam. When you conceive a dream of greatness, your consciousness raises the temperature of your vital energy. If you seal your lips, if you swallow the urge to tell it, that energy has nowhere to escape. It remains inside, growing in force. By not being able to manifest in the outside world through the easy and cheap route of words, the energy accumulates inside you, increasing the psychic pressure to unbearable levels. This internal pressure is blessed. It is the fuel of the gods. Feeling that you will burst from the desire to materialize your work, you are forced to move. That same pressure will force your hands to not sleep, to work in the shadows with a discipline of steel, so that the physical achievement is the escape valve. But what does the fragile man do? He heats the water of his enthusiasm and leaves the vessel uncovered. By talking about his projects, he uses the word as an escape valve. The steam comes out of his mouth, and as it exits, the internal pressure decreases. His spirit cools down. Suddenly, the wild urgency to act disappears because the creative energy has already dissipated into the atmosphere. It has become a harmless cloud of cheap talk. To speak is the abortion of action. Force is lost in the telling. Whoever recounts his battles before fighting them exhausts the strength he needed to hold the sword. The true warrior remains silent until the enemy is defeated and the objective is won. Silence is the only wall that can contain the explosive power of your soul. Keep the pressure inside, and you will move mountains in the physical world. Thirst the false nectar and the ibriety of the ego. To truly seal your lips, you must understand what pushes you to open them with such desperation. You must look directly at the disease of the ego. The human ego is a starving beggar that feeds on external validation. It is obsessed with recognition, with the admiration of others, and with the need to feel important in their eyes. When you have an extraordinary project in hand, the ego knows that if you keep silent and work in the dark, it will spend months or years without receiving applause. The ego abhors that wait. It does not tolerate hunger. Therefore, it convinces you that it is a good idea to share your plans with the tribe, seeking false support. In the instant you tell your acquaintances that you are going to found an immense company or write a masterpiece, a nefarious biological and esoteric phenomenon occurs. Your friends look at you with wonder. They congratulate you. They say, "It's a brilliant idea, you are a genius." Upon hearing this, your brain releases a cascade of pleasure. Your body reacts exactly as if you had already achieved the feat. You get drunk on the sweet nectar of triumph, feel the crown on your head, and experience the deep satisfaction of the winner. But it is a false triumph. It is a banquet of smoke. You have given your mind the reward without having crossed the battlefield. It is a lie. The mind, which is a creature of extreme efficiency, reaches a lethal conclusion. If I have already received the respect, admiration, and pleasure of success just by talking about it, why am I going to subject myself to the pain, uncertainty, sweat, and insomnia required to build the real work? The motivation dies of starvation. The motivation dies because it already ate the dessert before lighting the kitchen fire. By speaking, you have castrated your own will. You have become the tavern jester who tells stories of dragons he has never faced, while his sword rusts in a corner. The true monarch starves his ego in the early stages of creation. He is silent. He denies it the arms of premature applause. He keeps it isolated, cold, and hungry in the cell of anonymity, so that the enraged ego, desiring glory, uses all its rage in the brutal and undeniable execution of the work in the physical plane. The king does not drink from the nectar until the head of his enemy lies at his feet. Fast ye the gaze of others and the contamination of the ether. The loss of internal pressure and the drunkenness of the ego are not the only dangers. There is a darker threat that activates the moment your words leave your lips, the contamination of the ether by the gaze of others. Even if you assume those around you love you, the human subconscious is a labyrinth of silent envies and fears. When you, a man who refuses to rot in the inertia of the herd, announce you are going to jump into the void to claim a treasure, you are attacking the comfort zone of those who listen. Your ambition unmasks their cowardice. Your light threatens to show their shadows. Physically they smile, but in the subtle planes they resist you. The slave does not want his cellmate to become king, because that would force him to question why he remains chained. Therefore, while you tell them your plan, their minds begin to sow thorns in your invisible path. It's too risky, they will think. He's become arrogant. I hope life gives him a lesson in humility. They pull you. Even the blind love of a mother can be an alchemical poison. If you tell an audacious project to one who loves you but is ruled by fear, that person will worry desperately. They will suffer imagining your failure. And worry is a lead anchor. It is a destructive visualization held by the bond of love. It stops your movement. In primitive occultism, this dense force was called the evil eye. It is not about fairy tale witches. It is pure esoteric physics. Human thought emits radiation. Hidden envy, skepticism, and the fear projected by those who hear your plans adhere like a tar mist to the fragile structure of your creative seed. It poisons the work. When you break the law of concealment, you no longer just have to deal with your own fears. You have to drag the dead weight of the skepticism and cowardice of everyone you told your intentions to. The wise man does not allow the dirty soul of vulgar minds to step into his sanctuary. He covers his works with the mantle of absolute mystery. Bear the fourth pillar of the Sphinx. Approach the burning sands of antiquity and contemplate the effigy of the great Sphinx of Giza. That stone colossus was not sculpted as a simple monument. It is the guardian of the four fundamental pillars of magical power and absolute mastery over existence. The Hermetic axiom dictates four virtues: to know, to dare, to will, and to silent. To know represents pure intelligence. It is the mastery of the laws of the universe. To dare represents reckless courage. It is the audacity to jump into the abyss. To will represents the iron will. It is the unstoppable motor. Many men master these first three pillars. They are smart, brave, and tenacious, yet their works fail. They fail because they ignore the supreme mandate of the Sphinx, the fourth pillar that seals the operation: to keep silent. Silence is the unexpugnable wall that protects the other three powers. It is the dome that isolates the magical energy from the world's corrosion. The true master does not need to explain. He simply acts. The true master does not preach what he dares to do. His audacity is evident when the throne has already been taken. He does not announce what he wants. His will materializes suddenly, leaving spectators paralyzed. The Sphinx is the emblem of infinite power. Precisely because it has never opened its stone lips, it remains a mystery. It guards the secrets of pharaohs and the mysteries of stars, immutable, serene, heavy, and terrifying in its absolute silence. He who learns to be silent acquires the density and inscriptability of the Sphinx. To be like the Sphinx is to be invulnerable to the judgment of the world. Silence is the final seal of the true sovereign. First see the forge in the darkness and the burst of the king. Seal your jaw. From this precise moment, impose a state of siege on your vocal cords, your goals, your spiritual revelations, the money you are about to earn, and the lands you will conquer must become a secret kept under 7 lead keys in the deepest catacomb of your soul. Walk through the world of mortals with an inscrutable smile. When they ask what you are doing, respond with cordial vagueness. Talk to them about the weather, about banalities, about whatever they want to hear. Let them believe you are an ordinary man, that you are stuck, that your days pass in the same inertia in which they drown. Do not defend yourself against those who doubt you. Silence is power. Do not waste your saliva trying to prove the vision of an eagle to a fool. Accept being underestimated. Enjoy the tactical privilege of going unnoticed. Darkness is the mantle that protects you from enemy archers. While the world sleeps in the illusion of your passivity, you will be descending every night to the underground forges. There, in the sepulchral silence where no one sees you, you will unleash the god of war. You will strike the anvil with a sacred violence, without spectators, without applause, without seeking comfort. You will endure the extreme heat of the closed crucible. You will accumulate pressure until your veins burn and your eyes glow. Every majestic birth demands the solitude of the cloister. Diamonds crystallize in the suffocating blackness. The butterfly reassembles in the absolute enclosure of its silk coffin. The child forms in the mute abyss of the womb. Premature light kills creation. And one day, without warning, the seal will break from within. The seal will break not by your vanity, but by the weight of the finished work. The doors of your castle will burst open. You will come out into the sunlight dressed in majesty. The empires you forged in the dark will burst into the world with the impact of a comet. Those who underestimated you will be paralyzed by terror and fascination. They will look for some warning, some clue, but they will find nothing. They will not know where you came from. They will not understand how you managed to evade their defenses and conquer the peak without them seeing you climb. They will watch you with the silent respect granted to mysteries, and you from your throne will watch them. You will contemplate the wonder of the multitudes with a cold and lethal calm. You will not give victory speeches. You will not give explanations of your rise. Your existence will be the only proof needed. The work is done. The king has arrived. Chapter 3. Disconnecting from the hive mind and the annihilation of collective ghosts. Do not fear tyrants of flesh and blood, for their power ends where death begins. Fear the empires of smoke that nest in the sky of the human mind, for those monsters devour the soul of entire nations without spilling a single drop of blood. Unknown. There is a tragic and colossal illusion in which the human race is submerged. It is the mirage of free will. The ordinary man wakes up every morning, drinks his water, walks to his labor, and is absolutely convinced that his thoughts are his own. He believes, in the naivety of his ignorance, that the anger he feels is his own. He believes that the fear that oppresses his chest before the omens of ruin is a natural reaction of his intellect, and he believes that the passions that drag him to argue heatedly with his neighbors are the irrefutable proof of his freedom. But if an initiate, a master with cleared spiritual vision, contemplated the multitudes, if he saw them from the top of a mountain, he would not see millions of free individuals walking the earth. He would see an immense and docile flock of puppets tied by invisible threads that stretch toward the sky. He would see that those threads end in the claws of gigantic, dark and voracious entities, formed by clouds of dense mist. These entities are not mythical gods, nor demons emerged from the underworld. They are beasts engendered by men themselves. In the doctrines of classical occultism and hermetic magic, these creatures are known by a fearsome name, the Egregores. An egregore is an energetic entity, an autonomous psychic body that comes to life. It comes to life when thousands or millions of human beings focus their attention, their fear or their adoration on the same idea. And once the beast wakes up, its only purpose is to subdue its creators to ensure its own food. In this chapter, we are going to tear off the veil of the hive mind. We will descend to the anatomy. We will descend to the anatomy of psychic parasitism so that you understand why humanity lives enslaved by its own collective terrors. You will discover the supreme art of disconnection, and you will learn to wield the guillotine of indifference to cut the threads that tie you to the mud of the masses. Reclaim your sovereign crown. The parable of the idol of ash. To understand how men hand over their power and create their own executioners, we must open the heavy volumes of the legends of ancient Mesopotamia and remember the story of the citadel of Calin. They say Calin was a prosperous and peaceful city. One day news came that a terrible plague and an army of barbarians were approaching. Although the threat was still far away and the walls were strong, panic seized the citizens. Heralds shouted calamities on the corners, mothers cried in the streets, and fear poisoned the air. In their desperation, the high priests of the city ordered an immense idol of clay, ash, and iron to be built in the central square. They told the people that that idol, if they prayed to it with enough fervor, would come to life and protect them from evil. Day after day, night after night, the 50,000 inhabitants of Calin knelt before the monstrous statue. They cried, they screamed in terror. They cut their hands to offer their blood. They begged for salvation. And then, the unnatural happened. The statue, fed by the terror and collective hysteria of 50,000 souls for months, began to emit a deathly glow. The clay cracked and became dark flesh. The iron eyes lit up with a malignant fire. The idol came to life. But the beast did not walk toward the desert to face the barbarians. The idol stepped down from its pedestal and looked at the inhabitants of the city with hunger. To stay alive, the monster needed to continue absorbing the same energy that had engendered it, pure terror. So the idol of ash began to terrorize the citadel. It demanded daily sacrifices. It tore down houses. It roared in the night. The city of Calin no longer feared the plague or the barbarians. Now they lived enslaved and terrified by the very monster they had created with their prayers of panic. One day, a wise hermit entered the city. Seeing the devastation, he stood in the middle of the square in front of the roaring beast. The idol raised its fist. The idol raised its fist to crush him, but the sage did not shrink in fear. He did not pray. He did not flee. He simply crossed his arms, looked at it with absolute coldness and apathy, and yawned. The idol stopped dead, confused. The sage addressed the people who watched from the shadows. "Fools, this monster has no life of its own. Its body is made of the same clay and the same fear that you give it. Do not fight it. Turn your back on it. Return to your trades. Sing, work the land, and starve it to death." At first they hesitated, but little by little, the men and women stopped looking at the beast. They ignored its threatening roars. They stopped offering tears. As the people withdrew their attention and their fear, the fire in the monster's eyes began to flicker. Its dark flesh dried up again. Its movements became clumsy. In less than a week, deprived of the emotional breath of the multitude, the fearsome idol became once again an inert and pathetic statue of dry clay. It turned to dust. The physiology of the collective ghost. Listen to the wisdom held in the dust of Calin, because you live today in a citadel besieged by idols, much larger and more voracious. The human mind is not a closed vessel. It is a beacon that emits electromagnetic radiation toward the ether. When a single man harbors a thought of fear or anger, he emits a small cloud of energy. When 1,000,000 people tune their minds to the same thought, to the same tragic news, to the same economic panic or political hatred, those millions of small clouds converge in the invisible sky. They merge, they condense, and by an irreproachable law of esoteric physics, that massive energy acquires intelligence and its own will. An egregore has just been born. There are egregores of nations, egregores of political parties, egregores of fanatic religions, and the largest of all in our era, the egregore of panic and scarcity, fed daily by the heralds of disaster in every corner of the visible world. Once the egregore takes shape, it operates as a parasite. Its only imperative is to feed so as not to dissolve, and its exclusive food is the vibratory frequency that gave rise to it. If the egregore was born from hatred between two sides, the ghost will extend its invisible tendrils, descend upon the minds of the commoners, and sow intrusive thoughts of distrust, fury, and bloodlust. It will force men to argue pointlessly, to insult each other, and to hate their brothers. Men will believe they are defending great ideals, when in reality they are only chewing the food that fattens the invisible parasite floating over their heads. They are victims of their own creation, feeding the beast that enslaves their logic. There's the trap of the multitude and the degradation of the soul. The greatest triumph of the egregore is to convince the individual to abandon his solitary throne to join the mass, the herd, the hive. Masters of the occult have warned for millennia about the mortal danger represented by multitudes. When a man, no matter how brilliant, is submerged in a mob, his consciousness turns off. His sovereign spirit enters a state of lethargy, and his mind is kidnapped by the inferior spirit of the hive. In the multitude, intelligence does not exist. The mass does not reason, does not reflect, and does not seek truth. The mass only feels, and what it feels is, invariably, the densest, most basic and animal emotion, panic or fury. That is why multitudes composed of peaceful individuals are capable of committing atrocities and massacres without feeling the slightest remorse. In that instant, it is not they who act. They are the physical body, the hands, and the feet of the egregore that has possessed them and is using them to devour the material world. It is possession. The tyranny of the egregore is so perfect that you do not even need to be physically surrounded by people to fall into its trap. Today, the individual sits alone in his room, fixes his eyes on the crystals of long-distance communication, and lets himself be intoxicated by news, vulgar opinions, and global panic. He is now in the hive. The umbilical cord of the monster adheres to the base of his skull, and the vampirism begins. You feel the world is a dark place. You feel the economy will collapse. You feel the enemy is lurking. You feel exhausted, depressed, and without strength to lift your own destiny, because your prana is being sucked up by the collective ghost, for the illusion of opposition and the food of hatred. This is where the unwary traveler commits the most disastrous mistake of his spiritual life. The man realizes that the system is corrupt. He discovers that there is a tyranny imposed on his people. He fills his chest with noble indignation, raises the sword of justice, and declares war on the egregore. He becomes a fanatic. He spends his days debating, insulting those who defend the tyranny, protesting with fury and filling his mind with hatred towards the enemy. He believes he is destroying the monster, but he ignores the most macabre law of collective magic. The egregore feeds on resistance. In the realms of energy, devotion and hatred are the same. They are the same vibratory substance, only rotating in reverse. Fanatical love and fierce hatred share the same boiling temperature, the same obsessive fixation, and the same waste of vital force. The egregore of a tyrant does not care at all if you kneel to pray to him, or if you rise with clenched fists shouting curses. In both cases, you are giving him your attention. In both cases, your emotion is being channeled toward him. The slave who hates the master with fury is as tied to the chain as the slave who adores him. Furious resistance is the most succulent feast for the ghost. While you fight against shadows, the shadows will have substance. The art of disconnection, the guillotine of indifference. The only way, the absolute and solitary way to annihilate the power that the hive mind has over your destiny, is to wield the coldest, cruelest, and most majestic weapon in the arsenal of kings, the guillotine of indifference. Let us return to the lesson of the sage in Kalen. There are no swords that can wound smoke. The only way to kill a ghost is to condemn it to absolute hunger. And to starve the egregores that have parasitized your life, you must subject your mind to a quarantine of tactical isolation. You must apply a surgical cut to the invisible umbilical cords. From today, you are strictly forbidden to let rumors alter your heart. If the whole world panics over an imminent crisis, you will take a step back. You will contemplate the terrified crowd. You will hear the din of those who wail, but you will not move a single facial muscle. You will wrap yourself in a dome of spiritual glass. You will flatly and coldly refuse to give a single drop of emotion to disaster. You will not comment on the disputes of the common people. When at the table they try to drag you into a debate about sides or collective fears, you will remain in a frozen silence. When they demand your opinion, you will respond with the apathy of one who contemplates the struggle of two ants in the dust. You are above the game. True indifference is not ignorance. It is an act of calculated sovereignty. It is telling the universe, I know the game the shadows are playing, but I refuse to give them the fire of my attention. By withdrawing your attention, by depriving the egregore of your indignation and fear, the cord that united you to the beast rots and breaks. In the instant that disconnection occurs, you will experience an amazing physical lightness. It is as if you had released 100-pound iron yoke that you carried on your neck without knowing it. The shrill noise that used to torment your head will turn off. Your mind will recover the sharpness of pure crystal. You are free. V. The protective void and the isolation of the monarch. The price of this disconnection is isolation. I'm not talking about a physical confinement in a cave, but about the isolation of the spirit. The initiate who disconnects from the hive mind walks among men, but no longer belongs to their kingdom. Being free from the parasitism of the egregore, your reactions are no longer predictable. You do not laugh at what the mass laughs at. You do not cry for what the mass cries for. And you do not fear what the mass fears. This will cause rejection in the weak. Those who are still plugged into the hive will look at you with suspicion. They will call you insensitive, selfish, and apathetic. They will feel the cold of your armor. They will feel the silent contempt you feel for their useless drama. They will accuse you of having no empathy for the pain of the world. Do not give in an inch. Do not try to justify yourself. Their false empathy is nothing more than the complacency of wallowing together in the mud of collective fear. You are the architect of your peace. The sovereign knows that the only real way to help a sick world is not to catch the same disease to show solidarity. The only possible salvation is to rise above the pavilion of the infected, build a castle of unshakable health, and from there, throw the rope so that the few who have the courage to climb can get out of the pit. The void you create around you by disconnecting from the egregores acts as an impenetrable armor. While the world out there collapses, breaks, despairs, and devours itself in cyclical crises, you will remain in your center, serene and untouchable. Like the hunter who lurks from the top of the hill, you will watch the clumsy movements. Souse the throne on the mountain. Raise your gaze above the dark smoke that covers the city of sleeping men. Watch them run, tremble, and worship the idols of ash they themselves have erected with their cowardice. Observe them, but do not judge them with anger, for anger would chain you again to their misery. Observe them with the frozen compassion of the stars. The world is a theater of illusions, and the egregores are the directors of a macabre play where the entry is paid with the blood of the soul. But you are no longer part of the cast. You have handed in the script, stepped off the stage, and walked into the darkness of the hall where no one can dictate your emotions. You are the master. Withdraw today the devotion you have for the suffering of the majorities. Withdraw your loyalty to the tragedies of the news and your obedience to the opinions of the masses. Let the collective ghosts die of hunger in the public squares, deprived of the breath of your indignation. Keep the totality of your vital force for yourself. Keep every drop of your prana to forge the only entity that has the divine right to reign over your existence, the overwhelming weight of your own sovereign will. The throne on the mountain awaits, and the silence of the heights is your only true counselor. Rise now and let the phantoms of the valley fade into the distance. Chapter 4. Governing the Rhythm and the Art of Sovereign Imperturbability. Observe the vast and terrifying heartbeat of existence. Contemplate the starry sky and the ruins of ancient civilizations that lie beneath the dust of the desert. Everything in the observable universe, from the birth of galaxies to the heartbeat in your own chest, obeys a respiratory law, a cosmic inhalation and exhalation that never stop. Every empire that rises to touch the sun inevitably collapses to bite the mud. The coldest winter gives way to spring, and the most scorching summer is devoured by autumn. The universe is an immense and heavy steel pendulum that oscillates perpetually between two extremes, and the ordinary man has committed the stupidity of tying himself. He has tied himself voluntarily to the base of that pendulum. Look at the crowd, when luck smiles on them, when they accumulate a few gold coins, when love knocks on their door, or when the world pays them a fleeting tribute, they are filled with senseless euphoria. They become drunk with arrogance, celebrate loudly and lower their defenses. They convince themselves that summer will last forever. But the supreme law of the universe lacks mercy. The measure of the movement to the right inexorably dictates the measure of the movement to the left. The pendulum reaches its peak, stops for a fraction of a second and begins its brutal descent. The gold vanishes and love is corrupted. Tragedy knocks on the door, and those same men who yesterday laughed with pride, today crawl in corners tearing their garments, drowned in a miserable depression, wondering why the heavens have abandoned them. They are thrown from light to darkness, and from darkness to light again and again, until old age and madness consume their bones. They are victims of the rhythm. In this chapter, we are going to break the chains that tie you to the base of the cosmic clock. You are going to enter the science of the highest occultism to learn the art of higher polarization. You will discover that, although you cannot stop the movement of the universe, you possess the absolute power. You possess the power to raise your consciousness above the edge of the blade, becoming the untouchable master of your own destiny. The rhythm will no longer be your executioner, but the music to which you dance from the heights of your center. Prepare to climb the axis of the world and look down upon the storm with eyes of frozen fire. The parable of the sapphire seal. To understand the treacherous nature of emotion and the poison of extremes, we must travel back in time to the courts of ancient Babylon, where magic and the wisdom of the sages governed the fate of kings. The annals of mystery tell that there existed a fearsome emperor, a conqueror of nations and owner of incalculable riches. However, despite his immense military power, the emperor was a miserable slave to his own passions. His mind was a leaf blown by the storm. When his armies crushed an enemy nation, the emperor organized banquets of unrestrained euphoria that lasted for weeks. He became blind with arrogance, neglected his borders and wasted his treasure. But when a drought hit his lands or a rebellion broke out in a distant province, the same emperor locked himself in his chambers, pale with terror, paralyzed by anguish, and plunged into a melancholy so deep that he could not utter a single command. Aware that his emotional oscillations would destroy his reign, he called for a master. He called for the wisest and oldest of his alchemists, a silent man who inhabited the caves of the Crystal Mountains. "Master," the emperor begged him, "my spirit is a sea in a storm. When I win, glory makes me stupid and blind. When I lose, fear turns me into a coward. Make me an artifact, a magic amulet that restores my sanity. A talisman that protects me from the drunkenness of victory and rescues me from the despair of defeat." The alchemist nodded in silence and retired to his forges. Months later, he returned to the throne room and handed the emperor a sober and cold ring, forged in meteoric iron, set with a dark sapphire as deep as the night. "Majesty," the old man whispered, "this is not a talisman of vulgar sorcery. I have engraved an inscription on the hidden part of the ring under the stone, where it directly touches your skin. When the world kneels at your feet and you feel that you are an untouchable god, take off the ring and read the inscription. It is your anchor. And when the world crumbles around you and you feel that death is the only way out, take off the ring and read exactly the same inscription. Only then will you preserve your empire." Years later, the emperor fought the greatest battle of his history. His enemies were crushed. The treasures of 3 nations filled his coffers. The whole people cheered his name, throwing flowers in his path. Feeling his chest bursting with pride and that his power was infinite, the emperor, with a smile of arrogance, remembered the alchemist's promise. He took off the iron ring and read the hidden inscription. The engraved words said, "This too shall pass, for the pendulum returns." In a millisecond, the emperor's smile froze. The euphoria dissipated like smoke in the cold wind. The illusion of eternity broke. Realizing that glory was ephemeral, he regained his lethal coldness. ordered his generals to strengthen defenses, prevented the waste of the banquet, and saved his nation from a surprise counterattack planned. A decade later, a devastating plague decimated his army. His allies betrayed him, his walls were besieged, and hunger ravaged the city. Sitting on his throne in the middle of darkness, surrounded by advisors crying over the imminent fall of the empire, the king felt terror threatening to paralyze his heart. He reached for the ring. With trembling hands, he took off the iron ring and read the inscription, "This too shall pass, for the pendulum is already returning." Immediately the terror vanished from his spirit. He understood that pain and ruin were as illusory and fleeting as the victory of old. His chest filled with a frozen and unshakable calm. He stood up. He organized a masterful strategy based on patience and attrition, resisted the siege with a fierce will of ice, and months later, the exhausted enemy retreated into the desert. The emperor died in old age, having ruled with an iron hand, immutable before hell and paradise. He was no longer a slave to the swing, but the master of the center. Stir the poison of euphoria and the law of compensation. Listen with frozen blood to the implications of this parable, for it contains the death trap in which dreamers perish. The man who starts the path of power, who learns to concentrate his mind and execute his plans with determination, will inevitably begin to taste the honey of material victory. Doors will open and gold will fill his coffers. And it is in this precise and microscopic instant of glory that the novice commits the most devastating tactical error of his existence. He allows himself to fall into euphoria. Society has deceived you, teaching you that euphoria and extreme joy are virtuous and desirable states. They tell you that when you achieve a goal, you must jump. They tell you to jump with joy. Shout your victory to the four winds, celebrate to exhaustion, and let emotion overflow you. But in the court of esoteric physics, euphoria is a lethal poison. It is the energetic signature of ignorance. What is euphoria in its deepest root? It is the surprise of a slave who has received a prize. It is the surprise of one who deep down believed he did not deserve it. A king does not jump with hysterical astonishment when his servants serve him wine in his own castle. The king assumes the service with a heavy calm because it is his divine right. Only the beggar who finds a bag of coins in the trash screams with euphoria. But the danger of euphoria goes far beyond simple indignity. The danger lies in the law of compensation. When you experience an emotion of extreme joy, you are pushing the pendulum of the universe to the right with enormous violence. You are injecting an excess of force into the oscillatory movement of your own destiny. The balance remains. By immutable law, that pendulum that you have pushed to the peak of euphoria will stop, accumulate potential energy, and fall to the left with exactly the same violence, the same speed, and the same weight with which you pushed it. The universe will collect the debt of your emotional overflow. It is an inescapable mathematical balance. It is for this reason that, a few days after a great loud celebration, of an excessive exaltation or a boastful triumph, the man suffers an inexplicable accident, loses a significant sum of money, falls into a bed with fever, or suffers a devastating betrayal. And blind to cosmic laws, the man says, "What bad luck just when it was good." There was no bad luck. There was pure physics. He himself financed his misfortune by becoming intoxicated with the chalice of his own triumph. He pushed the pendulum with his joy, and the pendulum returned with the same force to strike him in the dark. The wise man knows that every high has a low unless he remains in the middle. 3. The anatomy of the pendulum and the fulcrum. To escape this cycle of torture and reward, we must analyze the geometric geometry of a pendulum. Imagine a large old grandfather clock with an immense steel blade swinging from side to side. The entire humanity is clinging to the lower base of that blade. Down there at the bottom of the pendulum, the movement is wider and faster. Those who cling to that base are dragged at great speed from joy to tears, from health to disease, from opulence to misery. Trying to stop the pendulum with bare hands, trying to block the circumstances of the outside world so that nothing changes, is a useless effort that will end by amputating your arms. The material world will change. Economies will collapse, bodies will age, and empires will fall. But if you raise your gaze up the steel rod of the pendulum toward the top, you will find the fulcrum, the support point, the axis on which the blade swings. At the support point, There is no movement. Although the base of the pendulum travels miles, the axis remains still. The axis remains in an absolute, silent and immovable stillness. The mastery of occultism does not consist in stopping the pendulum of life, but in executing the art of higher polarization. It consists in letting go of the emotional base, climbing up the rod of cold will, and establishing the seat of your consciousness at the support point. First, the art of higher polarization. Higher polarization is the absolute mastery over your own nervous system. It is the establishment of a dictatorship of ice in the center of your chest. How is this technique executed in the heat of daily battle? When life hands you the sweetest victory, when you close the monumental deal, or when the enemy falls at your feet, you act. In that exact millisecond, you will invoke the memory of the sapphire seal. You will bite your tongue. You will hold your breath. You will look at your material victory with a tactical and frozen detachment. You will flatly refuse to hand over an overflowing emotion to success. You will smile, yes, but with the light and bored smile. It is the smile of the monarch who already knew he was going to win before the game began. By refusing to experience euphoria, you are preventing the pendulum from swinging violently to the right. You are absorbing the impact of victory at the support point. And the result of this coldness is the greatest magic trick in the universe. By not having pushed the pendulum toward the extreme of excessive pleasure, the pendulum will have no momentum to return and hit you with pain. You have neutralized the law of compensation. The universe will approach you to collect the tribute of pain. Check its ledger. See that you did not exceed in joy and leave empty-handed. It will leave you to enjoy your wealth and material power without having to pay the toll of misfortune. And in the same way, when the outside world enters chaos, when markets crash, when a storm threatens to sweep your lands, or when betrayal appears at your table, the animal instinct will demand that you cry and enter into a panic. In that crucial second, you will apply the same ruthless rule. You will retreat to the support point. You will look at the outer disaster and refuse to involve your soul in the mud. You will remember that the fire that consumes matter has no power to burn the spirit. You will contemplate your ruin with a deep and sovereign apathy. The demons of fear will die of hunger in front of you. By refusing to suffer, by refusing to vibrate on the scale of panic, the pendulum of misfortune will slide over your armor of indifference without being able to drag you to the abyss. You have become the supreme spectator. The material world moves, but you remain anchored in stillness. The majestic apathy and the disappointment of vultures. This posture of coldness and equanimity will not turn you into a lifeless being, as ignorant men fear confusing peace with death. On the contrary, higher polarization will grant you a reserve of energy so colossal that your simple daily movements will be charged with a crushing gravity. You become a pillar of silent, heavy power. When you assume mastery of the pendulum, you become an indecipherable and terrifying creature to the rest of humanity. Society, the press, your adversaries, and energetic parasites operate under the premise that they can control a man if they can predict his emotions. If the enemy knows he can provoke anger, he governs you. If the flatterer knows he can buy your favor through praise and make you feel euphoric, the flatterer dominates you. If the financial system knows it can terrify you with the threat of poverty, the system is your owner. The emotional man is a puppet with very thick strings, easily manipulated by anyone who passes by on the street. But when the world tries to pull your strings and discovers that you have cut them with the scissors of neutrality, when the provocateur insults you and you look at him with the same cold expression with which you look at an old piece of furniture, when the flatterer sings your praises and you nod without vanity, the world enters panic. The energy vultures retreat confused. They cannot read you. They cannot predict your next step. By not offering them the friction of hate or the softness of need, you become unmanageable. Your imperturbable silence becomes a psychological weapon of mass destruction. Your competitors will make huge mistakes guided by desperation. Those around you will seek your favor with a respect bordering on reverence, because in a world where everyone is dragged by hysteria, the only man who remains still in the middle of the hurricane is perceived, instinctively and undeniably, as the legitimate owner of the wind. Your stillness is the command that quietens the storm. Chapter 5. Voluntary Sacrifice and the Unbribable Scale of the Cosmos. The slave prays, hoping that the heavens will give him gold as a gift. The monarch walks toward the forge, throws his most beloved pleasures into the fire, and demands that existence return to him the exact weight of his ashes in the form of absolute power. The Codex of the Black Flame. There is a poisonous and deeply rooted dream in the heart of the multitudes. It is the infantile fantasy of the free miracle. The ordinary man, consumed by the inertia of his days and the weight of his own mediocrity, kneels in the darkness of his bedroom and raises pleas to the infinite. He asks for overflowing wealth. He demands an unshakable love, claims an iron health, and dreams of the absolute respect of his peers. And after uttering his demands, he crosses his arms and waits. He waits for existence in an act of supposed mercy to descend from the heavens and deposit these treasures in his lap, without asking him for absolutely anything in return. He believes that the universe is a charity institution. He believes that his past suffering has granted him a credit, a right to be compensated. He ignores in his monumental blindness that existence operates under the rigor of a ledger of an unnegotiable mathematical coldness and accuracy. It is a system of perfect balance. In the ancient mysteries of alchemy, the law that governs the transmutation of matter and human destiny is unshakable. The law of equivalent exchange. You cannot obtain something of supreme value if you are not willing to destroy, burn, and deliver something of identical vibratory weight. For a new order to be born, the old must die. For a new order to be born, the old order must be sacrificed. Greatness is not a gift, it is bought, and the currency of exchange is never metallic gold, but the voluntary detachment from that which you cling to most. In this chapter, we are going to destroy the altar of spiritual beggary. You will learn that the pain of detachment. You will learn that the pain of detachment is not a punishment, but the price of admission to the domains of power. You will discover the majesty of voluntary sacrifice, the supreme act by which the carbon man tears off his own skin to force the cosmic scale to deliver to him in exchange immortality. It is the trade of the soul, the parable of the beggar and the ash staff. To illustrate the misery of those who desire gold without delivering the dross, we must enter the dusty streets of ancient Samarkand, city of merchants, mages, and beggars, where the legends of transmutation were whispered in the corners. They say that at the gates of the great bazaar there lived a beggar named Tariq. For 20 years, Tariq had dragged a lame leg, leaning on an old and knotted staff made of ash wood. His staff was his most prized possession. With it, he feigned a much more serious lameness than he actually suffered, managing to awaken the pity of rich travelers who, moved by his miserable appearance, threw him copper coins. Tariq hated his poverty, but he loved the compassion of others that his staff procured for him. One evening, an old man in a dark robe and penetrating eyes stopped in front of him. He was a master alchemist, a forger of metals, who had mastered the art of the philosopher's stone. The old man looked at the beggar and read his soul. The old man, reading the greed in his soul, offered him an unusual deal. "I have seen your misery, Tariq, and I have decided to open the doors of opulence to you," said the alchemist, pulling out from under his cloak a small crucible of glowing iron, whose fire did not consume his hands. "This is the crucible of equivalent exchange. Throw inside it any object that belongs to you, and the fire will devour its form to return to you exactly its same weight in pure gold." The eyes of Tariq flashed with a feverish greed. Without thinking twice, he searched his pockets and found a rusty nail. He threw it into the crucible. The flames flickered and the nail melted. The nail melted in a breath, and at the bottom of the vessel remained a tiny and imperceptible drop of gold. The beggar, euphoric, understood that the old man did not lie. He took off one of his broken sandals, dirty and smelly, and threw it into the fire. The flame rose, consumed the worn leather, and in its place appeared a nugget. In its place appeared a gold nugget the size of an acorn. Tariq screamed with joy, calculating how many banquets he could pay for with that. The alchemist, with an inscrutable face, lowered the crucible and said, "The fire does not distinguish between garbage and nobility. It only responds to the weight of what you deliver. If you wish to stop being a beggar forever, if you wish to buy a palace, lands, and horses, you must deliver something of true volume. Give me your ash staff." Tariq froze. He looked at the fire and then looked at his knotted staff. That piece of wood was heavy. If he threw it into the crucible, the gold would be enough for a life. If he threw it into the crucible, the resulting gold would be enough to live like a prince the rest of his days. But terror seized his guts. If he delivered the staff, his real lameness would improve, as he would stop forcing the posture. He would no longer inspire pity. He could no longer receive the sure coins of the merchants. The staff was the guarantee of his victimhood. It was his identity. Squeezing the wood against his chest, the beggar stepped back. "No," he whispered with a trembling voice. "I can give you my other sandal. I can give you my rags. But not the staff. I need it to walk. Without it, people will not look at me with pity. I will die." The alchemist looked at him with a frozen and lethal compassion. He extinguished the crucible with a slight movement of his hand, hiding it under his robe. "You demand the crown of a king, but you refuse to let go of the crutches of a slave," the old man sentenced. "The scale of the universe does not accept halfway deals. Keep it. Keep your rotten wood and the pity of men. You will die embracing your excuses." The master turned around and disappeared into the crowd of the bazaar. Tariq was left alone, in the dust, clutching his ash staff, condemned to beg for copper coins until the last of his days, having rejected absolute gold for fear of losing himself. Took the blind scale and the price of greatness. Listen to the dull echo of the alchemist's footsteps walking away, because that same cosmic entity has stood in front of you countless times, and you, just like Tariq, have squeezed your staff against your chest and rejected the empire. The law of equivalent exchange dictates that the universe is a closed and perfect ledger. Nothing is created from nothing, and nothing disappears without a trace. To materialize a new reality in the dense plane of your life, you must extract the raw material from your old reality. If you desire a physique of steel, impenetrable and majestic, you cannot simply want it. You must deliver to the cosmic fire the vulgar pleasure. You must deliver the vulgar pleasure of gluttony, the dead hours of laziness, and the comfort of the bed at dawn. If you demand a colossal fortune that ensures your bloodline for generations, you must sacrifice on the altar your weekends of sterile leisure, your nights of ephemeral drunkenness, and the terrifying fear of others. You must sacrifice the fear of what the mediocre will say when you start charging the real value of your work. If you demand the pure, unconditional, and sovereign love of a worthy partner, you have to throw into the crucible your pathological need for attention, your infantile jealousy, and the cowardly refuge of toxic relationships. The tragic error of humanity is trying to cheat the scale. The ordinary man approaches the crucible of destiny and throws in rusty nails. He delivers tiny sacrifices that cost him nothing. He reads one book a week, makes a mediocre effort for a couple of days, stops complaining for an hour, and then peeks into the crucible. He peeks inside indignant, shouting, "I have made the sacrifice. Where is my throne? Where is my gold?" Existence, impassive and mute, returns to him exactly the equivalent of his effort, a miserable drop of success that evaporates the next day. The scale is blind. You cannot bribe it with good intentions. It does not care. It does not care about your tears, nor how much you have suffered in the past. Inertial suffering is not a legal tender currency in the esoteric world. Only the voluntary, conscious and painful sacrifice of that which you love but which destroys you has the specific weight to alter the gravity of your destiny. You must pay. Tyranny, identity as the greatest tribute. The most expensive tribute, the ultimate sacrifice that alchemy demands of you, is rarely a material object. The universe does not need your money or your possessions. The supreme sacrifice that the crucible demands is the immolation of your old identity. Why is it so difficult to change? Why do men understand laws and fail? They fail because, like the beggar of Samarkand, they have fallen in love with their own staff. Victimhood is an exquisite, sweet, and addictive drug. When you assume the role of victim, when you say you have no money because the system is unfair, when you say you are alone because everyone betrays you, you get a hidden benefit. You obtain absolution. By being a victim, you are not responsible for your misery. The fault lies with the outside world. And furthermore, you get the consolation prize of slaves, the compassion of others. Your friends pity you, pat you on the back and tell you, "Poor you, how much you have suffered. It is not your fault. It is a lie." That compassion is the food of your weak ego. Asking a man to abandon his victimhood is asking him to throw himself into the fire. If you throw your role of victim into the crucible, you will gain absolute control of your life. You will be the undeniable master of your destiny. But terror paralyzes your guts because of the weight. The weight of failure will fall entirely, exclusively and crushingly upon your own shoulders. No one will feel pity for you anymore. The step toward greatness is a step toward a frozen and intimidating solitude. It is the solitude of absolute responsibility. You cannot take your old skin to the new kingdom. The door is narrow. The door of royalty is too narrow for you to pass through, dragging the bags of garbage from your past. You have to strip naked. You have to tear from your spirit the label of unfortunate man, of exploited employee, or of betrayed lover. That identity death is the true pain of the alchemical fire. It hurts to stop being. It hurts to stop being the person you have been for decades, even if that person was a wretch, because it was a known misery. But until you observe your own expired identity burning and becoming ashes on the altar, the universe will not deliver to you the substance of the king. You must die to the old self to be born to the new, for the false tribute and the mockery of the universe. In the labyrinth of this teaching, the ego of the seeker will try one last cheap magic trick. It will try to negotiate with the deity. The false seeker approaches the altar and says, "I understand the law. I will make a great sacrifice. I will work 15 hours a day instead of 8 to build my empire." The seeker exhausts himself. The seeker exhausts himself, falls ill, ages prematurely, and nevertheless the empire does not materialize. The fire spits out black smoke and no gold nugget appears. Why? Because the universe abhors the false tribute. The cosmic scale does not require you to sacrifice what is easy for you to sacrifice. It asks for the truth. If you are a compulsive workaholic, sacrificing your free time is not a true sacrifice. It is simply continuing with your neurosis. Esoteric sacrifice demands that you deliver exactly that which you are most terrified to lose. It demands your Achilles heel. If your weakness is the need to please everyone, it asks for a no. It will demand that you fire those who are useless, that you assume the hatred of your old friends, and that you endure being called a tyrant. The fire demands the sacrifice of your need for approval. If your weakness is intellectual pride, the scale will demand that you bend the knee and admit your shameful ignorance. The price is always to the exact measure of your deepest fear. Do not try to haggle with the force that moves the planets. Existence sees through your disguises and your noble justifications. It knows the exact corner of your soul where you keep the rotten wooden staff. Until you throw it into the fire, nothing will change. The voluntary fire and the abyss of inertia. There are only two paths through which man pays the tribute that life demands. There is no third path. Every creature born under the sun must cancel its debt, either through inertial suffering or through voluntary fire. Inertial suffering is the path of the vast majority. It is the destiny of the coward who refuses to change. As this man refuses to let go of his attachments, refuses to abandon his vices and clings to his mediocrity, the karmic debt of his existence accumulates, and the universe, which is the most inclement collector of eternity, ends up breaking into his life by force. It tears away his health through disease and his love through pain. It snatches his partner through betrayal or destroys his finances in a devastating bankruptcy. The inertial man suffers horribly. He loses what he loved, but he obtains in exchange no wisdom, no power, and no elevation of his consciousness. He is crushed by the gears of life without having participated in the forge. He is dross. Voluntary fire, on the contrary, is the supreme act of immolation of the chosen. The sovereign does not wait for the universe to come and collect the tribute. The sovereign walks by his own feet toward the altar of sacrifices. He observes his own life with forensic coldness, identifies the comforts and habits, and invokes the fire. With an act of will that borders on the divine, he takes his own attachments and throws them into the crucible. He inflicts upon himself the pain of detachment. He chooses the rigor of tactical isolation, avoids worldly feasts, and murders his own laziness on the altar of daily discipline. He pays the price in advance. When you choose short-term suffering to forge long-term discipline, when you decide to tear out by the root the people who sink you before life uses them to destroy you, When you yourself impose the hunger of temporary austerity to finance your empire, you are executing voluntary fire. And the miracle is that the universe respects. The universe feels a reverential respect and a deep fear before the man capable of burning himself by his own will. Seeing that you do not need to be pressured, seeing that you are the priest of your own immolation, existence retreats, lowers its punishing weapons, tips the scale in your favor, and pours over you abundance. What are you holding in your hands right now? What hidden crutch are you squeezing against your chest while you loudly demand that the gates of glory be opened to you? From this day on, ignorance has lost its anesthetic effect. You can no longer shield yourself in the fantasy that your lack of results is bad luck. The universe has been listening to you since the first heartbeat in your cradle. It has been holding the gold scale in front of your eyes, patiently waiting for you to put some real weight on the bronze plate. The era of mediocre sacrifices and rusty nails is over. If you truly desire the empire of peace, you must pay. You must look fixedly at the purifying fire and pay the stipulated price without shedding a single tear of self-pity. Cut off the excuse that you are not ready. Preparation is forged inside the crucible, not outside of it. Murder the lie that you don't know how to do it. You only need the inhuman courage to let go of the staff. Take your victimhood. Take your past traumas that you are so fond of. Take your infantile need to please the plebeians and throw them into the flames. Watch the fire of alchemy devour your excuses. Feel the heat burn the old skin you are shedding. Prepare to receive the impact of your new power. The forge is ready. Chapter 6. The Crossing of the Night Threshold. There is an unexplored realm, a vast, dark and terrifying continent in which the whole of humanity spends a third of its mortal existence. It is the realm of sleep. For the ordinary man subjected to the yoke of daily exhaustion, sleep is nothing more than a temporary cessation of his physical functions. It is a small daily death. It is a passive truce where the body rests and the mind turns off to be able to endure the next day the same weight of his miserable routine. Under this monumental ignorance, the masses surrender to rest with the same negligence with which an animal collapses in the grass after a hunt. But in the high spheres of occult knowledge, the masters of transmutation know that sleep is never passive. The deep mind, the unfathomable ocean of the subconscious that governs the tides of material existence, never sleeps. While your body lies inert in the bed, that colossal force continues to work with a silent fury, molding events, attracting circumstances, and weaving the web of your destiny for the following dawn. The supreme secret does not reside in sleep itself, but in the narrow and misty border that separates wakefulness from unconsciousness. It is that twilight state, that corridor of shadows where reason begins to dissolve. It is that state where the body becomes heavy. It is the crossing of the threshold under the gloom. In this chapter, we are going to tear away the veil of the night. You will learn why 99% of humanity uses this sacred threshold to poison their own future. And you will discover with the precision of a silent assassin. You will discover how the true monarch infiltrates his own mind during the last beats of wakefulness, sowing the seeds of an empire in the most fertile and vulnerable land of the universe. The night is not for forgetting, it is for creating. Prepare to walk through the shadows of the threshold and reclaim the scepter of your dreams. The parable of the thief in the gloom. To understand the magnitude of the negligence with which man treats his own rest, we must open the heavy volumes of the Oriental courts and remember the fall of the kingdom of Othar. The legends tell that the king of Othar was a ruler obsessed with the security of his empire. During the day, his castle was the most impregnable fortress. He ordered the forging of solid iron doors, raised polished stone walls that defied the clouds, and placed his best sentinels in every turret. No enemy, no spy, and no traitor could cross his domains while the sun shone in the sky. The king spent his waking hours dictating just laws, managing his riches and watching every coin. And yet, despite his titanic efforts during the day, the kingdom of Othar began to rot. Mysteriously, the harvests of the royal gardens woke up withered, plagued by seeds of black lotus and poisonous herbs. The treasures of the lower chambers disappeared in silence, and an aura of disease and misery began to leak through the marble halls. The king, enraged and on the verge of madness, ordered his guards to be whipped, believing that they betrayed him during the day. But the oldest sage of the court, a blind man who read the secrets in the wind, approached the throne and said, "Majesty, your sentinels are loyal and your walls are iron. The enemy does not assault you at noon. I have heard the steps of the usurper. The thief enters your domains every night, exactly at the instant in which the sun sets and the moon has not yet risen. He enters under the gloom." The king frowned. "That is impossible. At nightfall, I myself bolt the main door and release the beasts in the courtyard." The sage shook his head. "It is true, my lord," replied the old man. "You close the oak door with chains. But in your private chambers, in the back room where you strip off the crown to sleep, there is a small wooden door that leads to the forest. Each night, burdened by the weariness and fears of ruling, you lie in your bed and leave that small door open. You leave it open for the breeze and you fall asleep lamenting the problems of the kingdom. And it is through that unguarded door, in the silence of the twilight, that the thief slides in. He feeds on your complaints, walks through your gardens while you sleep, plants poison in the fertile earth and loots your peace. Of what use is the armor you wear under the sun, if you hand over the key to your kingdom in the shadows?" The king understood that his own nightly despair was the invitation for his ruin. He learned that the defense of the empire does not end when the eyes close, but that it is precisely then that the most dangerous siege begins. To the anatomy of the threshold and the fallen guard. Listen to the echo of this parable in the silence of your own bedroom, for you are that king, and your mind is the desecrated castle. During your waking hours, you possess a relentless sentinel, the conscious mind, the rational intellect. This guardian filters information, rejects madness, calculates risks, and lets you navigate the world. When you are awake, if someone approaches you in the street and shouts, "You are in ruin," your sentinel raises the sword and responds, "That is false. I am a man of resources." The main door is guarded, but the conscious mind cannot remain eternally on guard. It fatigues. As the day ends, exhaustion weakens the sentinel. You lie down in your bed, the lights go out, and the stimuli of the outer world disappear. You enter the state of hypnagogia, that dense, heavy, and lethargic phase where the body begins to paralyze, but consciousness still flickers slightly. That is the back door of your chambers, and under the gloom the sentinel of reason falls. Under the gloom the sentinel drops his sword, closes his eyes, and surrenders to sleep. In that exact millisecond, the door of your deep mind, the unlimited and creative subconscious, is left wide open, absolutely defenseless, devoid of any rational filter or analytical shield. It is the most vulnerable and powerful moment of your day. The subconscious is a land of tillage of a terrifying and magical fertility. It does not reason, it does not debate, it has no sense of humor, and it does not judge if an idea is good or bad for your survival. Its only and blind cosmic function is to take the last seed deposited in it before consciousness goes out and incubate it. It will take that seed, wrap it in the darkness of the night, incubate it in the depths of the ether during the next 8 hours, and command the physical universe to begin germinating it for the dawn. If you drop an oak seed, it will return a forest. If you drop poison, it will return thorns. It obeys without asking questions. Threat the poison of the night and the sowing of the slave. Contemplate now the macabre ritual that the common man officiates every night upon his own bed. The inertial individual lies down under the sheets, closes his eyes, and upon entering the state of gloom, instead of sowing gold in his defenseless castle, he voluntarily invites the demons of the abyss to enter his chamber. What does the ordinary man do in the last 10 minutes of wakefulness? He reviews his debts. He chews on the anger for the insult he received at noon. He imagines with terror the confrontation he will have with his adversary the next morning. He visualizes the possibility of bankruptcy. He relives his failures with detail. He revives his most humiliating failures, feeling in his chest the sting of humiliation and the frozen knot of lack. While his reason vanishes, his last conscious emotion is fear, revenge, or self-pity. By falling asleep in this state, the man has just executed the most destructive act of black magic possible. He has handed over to his deep mind, the engine of creation, a mold stained with blood and misery. The subconscious receives those images of ruin, feels the visceral anguish that the man imprinted on his body before losing consciousness, and assumes that this is an execution order. It assumes that the master of the house desires tragedy. During the next 8 hours, while the man snores in his ignorance, his deep mind works furiously in the invisible planes of existence. It moves the threads of circumstances, aligns variables, alters mathematical probabilities, and repels opulence, ensuring that the man finds an outer world designed to justify his terror. The slave wakes up exhausted, without knowing that he has spent the whole night digging his own grave. His kingdom rots by day, because he himself planted the poison under the moonlight. Every morning is the harvest of the nightmare he chose to cultivate in the sacred silence of the threshold. He is the architect of his own prison, for the infiltration of the monarch and the art of implantation. The true forger of his own destiny feels a sacred respect and a reverential fear for the threshold of sleep. The monarch never, under any profane circumstance, allows a single thought of misery, lack, or doubt to cross the border of his lips or his mind at the moment of surrendering to the night. He knows the power of the seed. To govern the physical world, you must learn to infiltrate your own secret chamber. You must become the master of the nightly crossing. This occult discipline does not require muscular effort. In fact, conscious effort will ruin the technique. It requires the subtlety of a silk thief and the majesty of a crowned king. When your body lies in the bed and you feel the material world beginning to dissolve, when your limbs become heavy like lead and lethargy clouds the edges of your perception, you must stop any thought about the past or the frictions of the day that concludes. The past has died and no longer belongs to you. You are in the void. In that state of drowsiness, of deep physical passivity, you will summon in the theater of your mind the emotional state of your greatest consummated triumph. You will not visualize the process of achieving your goal, as visualizing effort implies you are not there yet. You will visualize exclusively the end, the finished work. The finished work, the consolidated empire, the wealth materialized in your coffers, the absolute peace of one who no longer has battles to fight. But the mental vision is insufficient. The key of implantation demands the invocation of the physical body. In the gloom of your bedroom, you must induce the exact tactile sensation. You must induce the overwhelming feeling you would have if your great desire were already an irrefutable fact. How does the weight of gold feel in your hands? Feel its metallic cold. How does the crown feel on your forehead? Feel the pressure on your temples. How does a man sigh who no longer has a single debt in the world? He knows the lineage of his blood is secured for the next 100 years. Feel the immense and glorious relief that floods his lungs as he exhales. Dress yourself in that emotion. Wrap yourself in the unshakable certainty of victory as if it were a mantle of ermine and purple. Immerse yourself in the assumption that it is done. Immerse yourself in the assumption that the miracle has already occurred, that the physical reality you will see tomorrow is only a bureaucratic procedure, because in the planes of truth, you are already the absolute owner of your destiny. You are not asking, you are decreeing. You are not waiting, you are possessing the state. Feel the ecstasy of the impregnated sleep. The master execution of this rite demands that you fall asleep exactly while you hold this feeling of triumph and relief. You must not try to stay awake to force the visualization. You must allow sleep to drag you toward the abyss, but ensuring that the last boat in which you sail toward unconsciousness is loaded with treasure. It must be loaded with the treasure of your final state. When you manage to cross the threshold under the gloom, bathed in the silent ecstasy of opulence and peace, the hermetic miracle occurs. Your conscious mind turns off, and the golden seed of your triumph falls directly into the immense jaws of your subconscious. Since there is no logical sentinel to debate the idea, the subconscious receives it as an unnegotiable divine mandate. It does not question it. It does not say, "But my bank account is empty." The subconscious only recognizes the monumental vibration of victory that you have delivered and obeys with the submission of a giant. It obeys with the submission of a chained giant. During the hours of darkness, your body rests, but your spirit becomes a radioactive colossus operating in the ether. The infinite intelligence that governs the rotation of galaxies takes that emotional state and begins to break down doors, alter wills, and orchestrates synchronicities. It orchestrates indecipherable synchronicities and prepares the field of matter so that sooner or later, the three-dimensional reality is forced without any possible escape to reflect and justify the reign that you imposed in the shadows of your bedroom. He who masters the art of falling asleep in the vibration of the sovereign, he who masters this has conquered 2/3 of the battle before the sun rises. The world becomes a mirror of the nightly decree. There is no force in the universe that can stop the germination of a seed planted in the silence of the impregnated sleep. You have moved the lever that moves the world from the axis of your rest. Fast the harvest of dawn and the care of waking. The mastery of the nightly threshold has a twin brother, just as sacred and critical, that waits at the opposite end of the cycle, the moment of waking up. To that state of lethargy and fragility that you experience in the first instance in which the morning light touches your eyelids, before you remember who you are, is the return. Before you remember your problems, it is known as the hypnopompic state. It is the return journey from the underworld toward the surface. The door of the secret chamber is still ajar. The inertial man ruins his dawn in the same way he poisoned his sunset. He opens his eyes and allows the weight of his duties to flood his mind. He immediately allows the memory of his frustrations, the resentment of his disputes, or the oppressive weight of his duties to flood his mind. He reaches for mundane devices, contaminates his vision with news of others' chaos, and strangles his own peace before having set a foot on the ground. He has destroyed any subtle work. He has destroyed in 3 seconds any subtle work that the spirit had forged during the night. The monarch shields his dawns with a methodical cruelty. When consciousness begins to return to your body in the morning, forbid yourself the luxury of anxiety. Keep your eyes closed for a few more moments. Use the mist to seal the work. Use the vulnerability of that morning fog to seal the work of the night. Invoke again, with the same silent and heavy fury, the unshakable certainty of your victory. Feel the absolute gratitude for the air that enters your lungs and for the invisible empire that is already yours. Do not ask that the day be good. Decree it. Decree from the stillness of your sheets that the day just born will be an obedient servant to the whims of your will. Get up from the bed without haste, with the deliberate movements of a feline in the thicket. Do not hand over your first thoughts to the commoners. Protect the first hour of your day with the zeal of a dragon. Servant the mastery over the shadows. Contemplate the bed in which you will rest tonight. Look at it not as a simple piece of furniture made of wood and fabric, but as the sacrificial altar and the forge where your own immortality is molded. The time of taking your enemies, your executioners, and your debts to sleep with you has ended in a sudden and final way. From this precise day, your bedroom is a hermetic sanctuary. The threshold under the gloom will be guarded by the sword of your own consciousness. You will accept the tiredness of your body, but you will demand the iron discipline of your emotions in the last breaths of your wakefulness. You are the guardian of your own peace. Let the outside world collapse in its own nightly hysteria. Let the masses writhe in nightmares of scarcity, sowing thorns in their own land. You will turn off the light of reason, release the reins of mundane control, and slide down the slide of sleep wrapped in majesty, boiling peace and silent ecstasy. You will slide into sleep as the one who has already touched the top of the world. The night is yours, the subconscious is your servant, and the dawn will be your trophy. Sleep now, sovereign, for the universe is busy materializing the empire you have just decreed in the holy silence of the crossing. Chapter 7. Silent influence and mastery over the will of others. Contemplate the supreme ignorance in which civilized man dwells. He walks through stone streets, enters the halls of great palaces, and sits at negotiation tables, absolutely convinced that he is isolated. He believes his thoughts are an indecipherable secret, locked away in the impenetrable vault of his skull. He believes in the noise. He believes that the only way to transmit his will to another human being is through the clumsy, slow, and deceitful noise of words, or through the physical violence of his hands. Under this monumental deception, man becomes a slave to persuasion. When he desires something, a deal, the love of a woman, or respect, he resorts to chatter. He gestures, argues, raises his voice, smiles falsely, threatens, and begs. He exhausts his vital energy trying to push the mind of the other through the brute force of speech. And most of the time, he fails bitterly, for words awaken immediate resistance and distrust in the heart of the listener. But in the highest realms of arcane knowledge, the sages master a science that pales any strategy of ordinary men. They know that the vacuum that seems to separate one physical body from another is not a vacuum at all. It is a vibrant ocean, a subtle, dense and conductive fluid that permeates absolutely everything. The ether. It is the nervous system of all. The ether is the invisible web that connects without exception your mind with the mind of every creature that breathes upon the face of the earth. In this chapter, we are going to destroy the fallacy of physical isolation. You are going to learn to abandon the sterile noise of the tongue, to enter the lethal art of silent invasion. You will understand how the monarch emits direct commands through the etheric ocean, altering the climate of a room, bending the hostility of his adversaries, and dragging events toward his favor, using as his only weapon the crushing gravity of his own and quiet presence. Silence is not empty. It is full of your unshakable authority. The parable of the ice emissary. To understand the futility of noise and the omnipotence of silent frequency, we must go back to the bloody steppes of the ancient world, where wars were not always won with steel. Ancient annals tell that there existed a relentless warlord, known for his indomitable cruelty. His army had camped at the gates of a peaceful citadel at dawn. The warlord accepted no deals, took no prisoners, and immediately executed any negotiator who dared to cross his camp. At midnight, the gates opened. A single man came out, unarmed, without armor or escort. He was a master of inner mysteries, an old man with an unfathomable gaze. He walked inexorably toward the enemy tents. The guards, amazed by his daring, captured him and dragged him to the warlord's tent. The chieftain, sitting on a throne of skins and surrounded by bloodthirsty generals, looked at the old man with contempt. He drew his sword, struck the table with fury, and began to shout. He insulted him and described how he would torture the people. The noise of his threats filled the tent, fueled by the fierce laughter of his men. The old emissary did not utter a single word. He did not retreat a single millimeter. He did not frown, show fear, or show a false, haughty bravery. He simply stood there, anchored his feet in the earth, relaxed his breath, and submerged his consciousness. In the interior of his mind, the old man did not see a bloodthirsty general. He saw a scared child wrapped in a steel tantrum. The old man invoked a vibration of peace so absolute, so cold, and so dense that it seemed made of lead. He flooded the invisible space of the tent with the heavy certainty that the war had already ended. He emitted that frequency through the ether with the power of a scorching sun, keeping his lips strictly sealed. Little by little, something unnatural began to happen. The warlord's shouts began to lose strength. His voice broke. The laughter of the generals died out, replaced by a suffocating discomfort. An invisible weight fell on them. The chieftain felt the air become thick. A sudden and deep fatigue invaded his bones. The terror and fury that fueled him evaporated, absorbed and neutralized by the black hole of the old man's calm. After 15 minutes of deathly silence, the warlord, sweating cold and without understanding what sorcery had bent his spirit, dropped it. He dropped his sword to the ground. He fell to his knees, overwhelmed by a respect that bordered on dread, and with a trembling voice ordered his generals to strike camp. The army retreated before dawn, defeated, humiliated, and dominated by a man who never needed to open his mouth to win the war. He won in the silence of the ether. Tie the nature of the invisible ocean. Listen to the silence of that tent and engrave it in your consciousness, because you face warlords every day. You face greedy partners, hostile markets, and treacherous adversaries. To exercise the power of the emissary, you must first demolish your conception of physical space. They taught you that the air between you is a vacuum. This is a deception of the physical senses. The ether is a conductive sea. In the same way that ocean water transmits sound waves for miles with terrifying clarity, the ether transmits the waves of your mental and emotional state to the nervous system of everyone around you. Your brain and heart are industrial transmitters of signals. At every second, you are bombarding the etheric field with electromagnetic signals. When the vulgar man enters a room feeling inferior, terrified by the possibility of rejection and desperate for approval, he is emitting a signal of noisy and chaotic static. His vibration shouts, "I am weak, I need you to accept me. You can devour me." And the people in that room possess a primitive animal instinct that decodes that signal instantly. Without knowing why, they will feel contempt for that man. They will ignore him or subject him because his own vibration has extended an open invitation to abuse. In contrast, when the true monarch crosses the threshold, physics alters. The sovereign does not need to make flashy gestures to be noticed. His presence is lethally silent, but the ether around him is charged with a frequency of solid iron. His vibration emits a mute but deafening command. "My kingdom is complete. I need nothing from you. My authority is non-negotiable." They feel the gravitational impact. They feel the impact of a superior mass entering their orbit, and obeying the immutable law that dictates that the lighter body must always revolve around the heavier body. The individuals in that room will bend their will and seek the approval of that silent man who has just usurped the throne of the invisible space. Weight is power. Thus, the futility of the tongue and the noise of the weak. Understand this with the clarity of a lightning bolt in the dark. Verbal persuasion is the refuge of those who lack spiritual power. When you use spoken language to try to change someone's mind, you are operating at the lowest, clumsiest, and most defensive level of human communication. Words are aimed at the conscious mind. The conscious mind is a fortified castle. It is trained to suspect, to look for double intentions, to argue and to resist. If you sit in front of a client and say with desperation, "Sign this contract," his conscious mind will raise shields immediately. He will think, "Well, why is he begging? Surely he wants to scam me." The word creates friction. Silent influence operates under the door. It infiltrates the catacombs of the other's nervous system, passing through the barriers of reason because it does not use the tongue. It uses the direct transfer of state. Words should only be used as the last and light finishing blow, a mere formality to seal a deal already won in the silence. If you have to exert yourself speaking, if you feel you are losing your breath trying to convince your adversary, it is the irrefutable proof that your internal vibration does not have enough weight. You have lost the battle of the ether, and you are trying to win the consolation prize in the theater of mortals. The true king rules first. Fair forging the psychic bullet, thought transference. The application of this forbidden knowledge is not a passive act. It is the surgical, aggressive, and ruthless manipulation of the invisible web. It is the art of forging and firing the psychic bullet. When you need to bend a situation in your favor, you must prepare before the physical encounter occurs. You must forge the intent. In the solitude of your chambers, you will enter absolute immobility. You will close your eyes and summon the image of the person or scenario you are going to face. You will not imagine them with hostility, as aggressiveness emits static that bounces off shields. You will imagine them with a sovereign neutrality. You are the commander. Next, you will formulate in your mind a single, simple, and definitive command. It cannot be a plea or a hope. It must be an irrevocable sentence. You are going to sign the agreement with docility. You are going to lower your gaze and give way. Once you have forged the command, comes the supreme step of alchemy, impregnation. It is not enough to think the phrase. You must inject it with the weight of physical certainty. You must feel in your stomach the cold relief and satisfaction of knowing that this individual has already obeyed your order. Feel how the resistance of that person crumbles in your hands like a clod of ash. Condense it into a sphere of light. Condense that certainty into a sphere of dense light in the center of your forehead, and then in the silence of your mind, project that sphere directly toward the forehead of the absent individual. Send it through the web of the ether as a silent missile. That seed of thought will penetrate their subconscious while they sleep or walk. Their deep mind will receive the command, and not coming from an external voice that activates defenses. It will assume the idea has sprouted from within. They will think, "Maybe I should yield to him. It seems like the most sensible decision." You will have implanted your will in their gut, and they will believe it was their own choice. V. The law of absorption and the orbit of the heaviest. When the moment of the face-to-face encounter arrives, your job is not to repeat the psychic attack. Your job in the physical arena consists of executing the law of absorption. You will sit in front of your interlocutor. You will adopt a posture of absolute relaxation, as if the result of that meeting mattered to you as much as dust. You will relax the muscles of your face, anchor your breath in the depths of your diaphragm, and look the individual in the eyes. But your gaze must not be aggressive or penetrating, as the predatory gaze scares the animal and makes it flee. Your gaze must be heavy. It is the gaze of one who knows the end of the story. It is the void. You will look not at the surface of his eyes, but at an imaginary point situated 3 centimeters behind his neck. While the other individual speaks, agitates, or tries to intimidate you, you will not react. You will not interrupt. You will show neither agreement nor disagreement. You will only hold the immense and unbearable silence. Upon finding this vacuum, the mind of your interlocutor will panic. Human beings cannot stand absolute silence. They are terrified of the void because they feel absorbed by it. The individual will begin to overtalk, trying to fill the silence with concessions. They will begin to doubt their own arguments in the face of your coldness. Without you having raised an eyebrow, the polarity of the room will have inverted. He will be orbiting around your sun. He will feel the overwhelming need to please you, to break that frozen tension that threatens to swallow him alive. And when you finally break the silence, your words must be few, slow and sharp, like a blade. The command you planted in the ether days ago will resonate in his subconscious, and submission will be imminent. He will speak your will, thinking it is his own voice. The victory was won in the invisible. The physical world is just a mirror following the heavy lead of your internal state. You are the master of the encounter. First, the vacuum shield and immunity to lesser minds. Mastery of the web of the ether does not only serve for offense and conquest, it is the supreme defense mechanism against parasites and manipulators. Out there are multitudes that, unconsciously, try to invade your etheric field. They are energy vampires, toxic people, and the weak who seek to drag you into their pit. They try to throw their own commands of fear, guilt, and inferiority at you. If you react to their attacks, if you get angry, if you argue with them, their poisonous claws will have hooked into your web. You have entered their game. You have accepted their frequency. The only defense is the construction of the vacuum shield. When someone tries to offend you or discharge their hysteria upon you, your mind must become a polished crystal. Do not block the energy of the attack, for trying to stop a blow wears down your strength. Instead, become transparent. Imagine the words and ill intention of the aggressor are arrows of fire. Your armor is nothing. If you put on iron armor, the arrows will hit and burn the metal. But if you become empty space, the arrows will simply pass right through you without touching you. They will end up stuck in the wall behind you, consuming the aggressor in their own sterile rage. The aggressor needs your emotional reaction to confirm that they exist. By denying them the slightest disturbance in your pulse, by looking at them with the inscrutable distance with which an emperor looks at an out-of-tune jester, their own energy will turn against them. They will feel ridiculous, small and miserable, and flee to find a weaker victim who offers the friction you have denied them. Zeus, the king in the room, look at yourself now. Raise your hands and understand that you are not made of imprisoned flesh. You are a transmitting station of indescribable power, and your threads extend to the ends of the earth. You have stopped being the commoner who begs for a crumb of attention. You have abandoned the pathetic need to convince the world. You have abandoned the noise of discussions and justifications. You know the secret of the ice messenger and possess the key to enter the minds of men while they sleep. The next time you enter the arena of material life, be it business, love, or war, you will remember your etheric nature. You are the ocean and the wave. You will close your lips. You will seal your breath. You will deploy the immensity of your invisible presence over the room, flooding every corner with the heavy, suffocating, and glorious density of your unshakable will. And while the world around you struggles, you will sit on your throne of absolute silence. You will watch with a frozen smile as the fiercest wills on earth silently bend at your feet, unable to resist the inaudible mandate of the one and only true king of the ether. Your silence is the sword. Wield it. The world is a frequency, and you have finally found the dial of the masters. Command the field, rule the rest. Chapter 8. The Principle of Necessary Friction. There is a universal tragedy that is repeated daily in the lives of men. A cycle of enthusiasm and failure that has buried more dreams of greatness than all the wars in history. Contemplate the seeker who, after discovering a spark of knowledge or conceiving a monumental plan, throws himself into the conquest of his own destiny now. During the first days, his energy is a wild torrent. He rises before dawn, his mind is sharp, obstacles seem tiny, and the physical world seems to yield to the fury of his intention. His work advances with giant steps. The man, intoxicated by this speed, believes that the inertia of his initial enthusiasm will be enough for the peak. But suddenly, without warning, without any external tragedy having occurred, the current stops. The project stagnates. The business stops growing. The passion in his relationship goes out. An inexplicable heaviness invades his muscles. A fog of lethargy covers his mind. And each step that was once light now requires a great effort. It requires the effort of dragging an iron chain. The man tries to force the march, but he feels like he is pushing a solid stone wall. In his ignorance, the inertial man believes he has failed. He believes life is giving him a signal that he chose the wrong path. Filled with bitterness, he abandons the work and drops his heavy sword. He retires to look for a new project, a new cheap emotion to give him back the initial spark, only to hit the same wall months later, condemned to be an eternal beginner of unfinished works. What this man ignores is that he has not been a victim of bad luck, nor of the weakness of his spirit. He has been a victim of a cosmic law. He is a victim of an unshakable cosmic law, a hidden mathematics that governs from the movement of planets to the heartbeat of an atom, the law of the octave. In this chapter, we are going to dissect the mystery of vibration. You will understand why every force in the universe loses its natural momentum and deviates from its goal. You will understand why it deviates from its original purpose. And more importantly, you will learn the secret technique of the masters of transmutation, the art of the conscious shock, the only key capable of breaking paralysis and forcing material existence to surrender before your immovable will. Friction is the fuel of the king, the parable of the navigator and the Dead Sea. To understand the treacherous nature of impulse and the rigor of friction, we must open the maps of the ancient navigators, those who ventured beyond the known horizon. Logbooks buried by time tell that a king sent his best admiral to discover a continent of gold that, according to prophecies, was across the great sapphire ocean. The admiral set out with a majestic fleet. Leaving the port, the east winds blew with an overwhelming force. The sails swelled, the bows cut the waves like knives, and the sailors sang with joy. For weeks, the journey was an effortless triumph. Nature itself seemed to push them toward their destination of glory and pure power. But upon reaching the exact center of the ocean, a terrifying phenomenon paralyzed the fleet. The wind, which had been their unconditional ally, died suddenly. The sky turned a whitish, cloudless blue. The waters lost their waves and transformed into an immense and suffocating mirror of dark glass. No breeze, no currents at all. The sails hung like dead rags from the masts. They had entered the dreaded Dead Sea, a zone of doldrums where the inertia of nature simply ceased to exist. Days passed. The scorching sun began to rot the rations. The wood of the ships creaked from the dryness. The sailors, once euphoric, began to mutter in deep desperation. Fear turned into despair and despair into mutiny. They prostrated themselves before the admiral and pleaded, "The gods have abandoned us. This is the end of the world. We must offer sacrifices or let ourselves die. The wind has dictated sentence. We are not destined to reach the continent of gold." They were ready to surrender. The admiral, a man forged in the discipline of silence and iron, did not look to the sky to plead for the return of the breeze. He looked into the bloodshot eyes of his men and drew his sword. "Cowards confuse the absence of wind with the end of the journey," he sentenced with a voice that froze the blood of the entire crew. "The wind brought us here, but the wind is not our master. It is only a beast of burden that has grown tired. Now, nature demands from us the tribute of human sweat to cross the abyss." The admiral ordered the heavy war oars to be taken out from the holds where they lay forgotten. He forced every man to sit on the wooden benches. He forced every man, including himself, to row under the killer sun. For 14 days and 14 nights the fleet advanced centimeter by centimeter, not by the grace of nature, but by fury, pain, blood on the hands, and the brutal will of the crew. Just when their strength was about to be extinguished, they crossed the line. They crossed the invisible line of the Dead Sea. A new and fresh current of air hit their faces. The sails swelled again with a roar, and the fleet, propelled by this new wind, sighted the golden shores of the new continent at dawn. The sailors celebrated the new wind, but the admiral knew the truth. It was won by the oars. The anatomy of stagnation, the hidden intervals. You are the admiral of your own existence, and your projects are the fleet you send toward the horizon of greatness. The ancient schools of mysteries, heirs of Pythagorean mathematics, taught that the universe is not a silent chaos, but an immense vibratory symphony. Every action and every life follows a musical scale structure. When you start an undertaking, you emit an original note. The octave begins, the frequency increases, the vibration accelerates, and the project advances. But the law of nature establishes that vibrations do not develop uniformly. There are two exact points in the musical scale where the distance between the notes changes. These are the natural semitones. In esoteric science, these gaps are known as the retardation intervals. These intervals are the Dead Sea of the parable. They are blind points in the structure of the universe where the original force, the initial enthusiasm that propelled you, loses all its power of acceleration and stops. It is an inescapable phenomenon. It occurs in the birth of empires, in the assimilation of knowledge, and in the development of love between two beings. There comes an exact moment when the natural impulse chokes. It is the moment when your perfect diet stops giving results and your body refuses to change. It is the ceiling. It is the week when your business, which was growing without restraint, hits an invisible roof and sales freeze. It is the dawn when you sit down to write your masterpiece and find that inspiration has abandoned you completely, leaving you in front of a terrifying void. The universe stops your vibration. The inertia finally dies. It is in this suffocating lethargy where 99% of humanity surrenders their weapons, confusing the mathematical pause of nature with a personal defeat. They do not know that the music has not ended. It has only reached the silence that precedes the next movement. They quit exactly when the real test of the king begins. Third, the deviation of the current and the law of the twisted reflection. Understanding the existence of this interval is vital, but ignoring its cosmic consequences is a mistake paid with a whole life. What happens if a project reaches the point of friction, the retardation interval, and the individual does nothing to overcome it, waiting for things to get better or for motivation to return? In the physics of the invisible, a force that loses its momentum does not simply stop to rest. Energy cannot stagnate indefinitely. If it is not pushed forward, it is captured by external influences. When a vibration reaches the interval and does not receive a new impulse, it deviates from its original direction. It changes. It changes its angle. It modifies its nature. Observe the tragedy of human history. A group of noble men initiate a revolution to free their people from tyranny. The initial impulse is just, brilliant, and charged with honor. They advance with force, but they reach the interval. Power corrupts, friction appears, and weariness occurs. By not knowing how to inject a conscious superior impulse, the revolution deviates from its original angle. Over time, those liberators end up becoming much more bloodthirsty tyrants than the kings they overthrew. They started seeking freedom and ended up forging new chains. The vibration twisted because it lacked the shock. This same macabre deviation operates in your daily life. You start a business with the noble intention of achieving peace and independence. You start with fury. You reach the interval of friction. The business becomes heavy, betrayals arise, and crises come. By not applying the conscious shock, the energy of your project deviates. Years later, you find yourself trapped in a corporate machine that has stolen your soul, devoured your time, and destroyed your peace. You started seeking freedom, and the interval deviated you until you became the most miserable slave of your own creation. Everything left to inertia ends up becoming exactly the opposite of its goal. The conscious shock, the injection of cold fire. To avoid the deviation of destiny, the sovereign must become the master of the oars. He must master the art of the conscious shock. The conscious shock is a deliberate, unnatural, and brutal injection of additional energy, applied exactly at the moment when the inertia has died. It is the purest act of will that exists, It exists because it is not born of desire, it is not born of joy, and it is not born of inspiration. It is born of iron discipline. When your project stagnates and heaviness invades your mind, your body will ask for rest. Your intellect, cunning and cowardly, will manufacture 1,000 rational excuses for you to abandon. It will tell you the market is bad or I need to find myself. At that precise moment, the initiate recognizes the guardian of the interval. He knows he has entered the Dead Sea, and instead of backing down, the initiate smiles with a lethal coldness. He knows this is the moat with thorns designed to keep away the mediocre. How is the conscious shock applied? It demands that you make a supreme effort that is completely disconnected from your emotional state. If you are exhausted, you do not look for motivation. You act despite the exhaustion with a mechanical and furious exactness. You force your hands to work, tearing the work from apathy. The conscious shock often requires introducing an element completely foreign to the original octave. If your business is stagnated, the shock is not to keep doing the same thing harder. The shock may be to destroy the business model completely, sacrifice immediate gains, or introduce a superior knowledge that terrifies you. It is introducing a new fire, of a different color, into the forge that is going out. By applying this unnatural and non-mechanical force of will, you break the interval. The energy that threatened to deviate is hit, straightened, and pushed to the next level. The invisible barrier cracks and the current of success catches you. Fare the second interval and the darkest night. But cosmic architecture keeps one last and terrible test for the one who has overcome the first barrier. The vibratory scale of creation has two intervals, two zones of vacuum. The first appears near the beginning to filter out the lazy and the curious, but the second interval is located exactly at the end of the scale. It is found a millimeter before the culmination of the great work. It is the interval between the sigh and the final do. It is the densest darkness that precedes the dawn. You have applied the first shock. You have rode for years. You have built your empire, your body or your mastery with sweat and blood. You are at the top. You're about to cross the line that will separate you from the ordinary world forever. And right there, when you reach out to touch the crown, the second interval hits you with the force of a dark hurricane. This second vacuum does not manifest as simple heaviness or stagnation. It manifests as the apparent collapse of all. A terminal crisis breaks out in your environment. A slander threatens to destroy your name. A vital partner stabs you in the back. Your resources evaporate mysteriously at the last second. It seems the gods of chaos have conspired to annihilate you one step from the door. The panic this produces is truly indescribable. The seeker, who has resisted so much, breaks in pain, believing the universe has played a macabre joke, letting him see paradise only to throw him into hell at the last breath. But the initiate of high magic knows the truth of this abyss. He knows that this terminal crisis is not a destruction, but a supreme test of purity. The peak of power does not admit impurities. The universe needs to ensure that the man who is going to occupy the throne has emptied every last drop of his old ego, his pride, and his fear. The conscious shock required to cross this second and final interval is of a nature diametrically opposed to the first one. It is peace. 13's the forging of the perfect sound and the closing of the circle. If the first shock demanded fury and brutal willpower, the second shock demands absolute surrender. When everything crumbles a step from victory, do not try to hold the columns of the temple with your bloody hands. Do not struggle with despair. Do not beg for mercy. Stop, let go of the weapons, stand in the storm. Stand in the middle of the storm, raise your chest, look at the abyss that threatens to swallow your life's work, and accept the loss with unshakable majesty. You must reach the vibratory state of the sovereign martyr. You must say, if the universe wishes to destroy this, let it burn. My crown resides in my untouchable essence. Destroy my work if you wish, but I will not bend before fear. In the exact millisecond in which you reach this total surrender, in which you let go of the desperate attachment to the result and accept apparent annihilation without losing your majesty, the supreme magic occurs. The second interval finally closes. The illusion of disaster vanishes like smoke. The universe retreats, reverencing the monarch who has shown he is not a slave even to his own creations. The crisis is resolved with a synchrony that defies logic. Enemies fall, resources flow, and the great work materializes before your eyes with a perfection beyond words. You have touched the final note of the octave. You have completed the circle of creation. That which is born in the fury of the beginning, pushed by the rigor of the oars in the Dead Sea, and purified by the fire of final surrender, becomes an eternal work, armored against time and corrosion. You have become the music. Souther, the privilege of friction. From this day forward, when life hits you with stagnation or threatens to paralyze your steps, you will not commit the aberration of lamenting. You will not bleat like the sheep that cries when it hits the fence. You are going to love the friction. You are going to worship the obstacle. It is the signal of your promotion. When the weight of reluctance falls on your shoulders and the inertia of your projects dies, a cold and ruthless smile will draw on your face. You will know that you have reached the altar of tests. You will know that it is the exact moment when millions of cowards are dropping their tools, leaving the gold free for you. Take out the oars of your own soul. Inject the cold fire of blind discipline. Govern the vibration of your destiny. And when the conscious shock splits in two the barrier of the infinite, the currents of absolute power will lift you up, carrying you toward the thrones reserved since the beginning of time for the masters. Chapter 10. The Forging of the Iron Will and the Annihilation of Dispersion. You have walked the darkest corridors of knowledge. You have learned to seal your lips, to disconnect from the ghosts of the masses, to govern the pendulum of your emotions, to deliver your sacrifices to the fire, and to fecundate the abyss with the seed of your desire. You now possess the complete arsenal of a forger of worlds. And yet, there exists a final abyss in which men perish who, even possessing all the weapons, lack the strength to hold them. It is the plague of the divided mind. Observe the inertial man. His vital energy is an immense lake, but its waters spill in 1,000 different directions. One current pulls toward the ambition of wealth. Another deviates toward the desire for revenge against an enemy. Another escapes toward the lust of nightly pleasures, and a dozen more evaporate in the fears, doubts, and trivialities of the day-to-day. This man believes he is fighting for his empire, but in reality, his mind is a constant civil war. His thoughts collide with each other. They cancel out his own forces. He possesses light, but it is a scattered, weak light, incapable of warming even his own hands in the middle of winter. In the supreme spheres of occultism, it is taught that the power of manifestation does not respond to the amount of physical effort you waste, but to the degree of psychic concentration. It responds to the degree of psychic concentration you are able to sustain. In this chapter, we are going to destroy the broken mirror of your consciousness. You are going to learn the cruelest, most difficult, and majestic of the arcane arts, the discipline of the unified ray. You will discover that the iron will is a steady gaze. You will discover that the true iron will is not a muscle that tenses, but a gaze that does not blink. You are going to condense the entire immensity of your being into a single incandescent point, transforming your mind into a weapon of precision so absolute that no earthly circumstance will be able to resist its impact. Focus is power. The parable of the crystal of Karaman. To understand the futility of scattered effort and the omnipotence of condensed attention, we must open the sand-covered scrolls of the ancient crusades in the desert of Karaman, where beasts and empires clashed against the immovable rock. Chronicles tell that a powerful warlord reached the gates of a mythical citadel in a canyon. The city had no walls, only a single gate. But it was not a gate of wood or common iron. It was a colossal slab of obsidian and celestial bronze, forged by the ancient sages, of such thickness that no ram could chip it. For 3 months, the chieftain ordered his men to strike the gate. They built gigantic siege machines for it. They struck the metal day and night, lit gigantic fires at its feet, and tried to open it with the strength of elephants and oxen. They sweated blood and exhausted their provisions, but the black gate of Karaman remained immutable, mocking their brute force. One afternoon, an old man in tattered robes was brought before the chieftain. The old man, who was a master glassblower and knew the hidden geometry of light, looked at the intact gate and smiled. "My lord," said the old man, "your army has the strength of 1,000 storms, but your strength is like a handful of sand thrown into the wind. It hits everywhere, but it penetrates nowhere. I will teach you. I will teach you to tear down that gate without lifting a single ram." Desperate, the chieftain accepted. The old man asked for desert sand, high-temperature fire, and 7 days of absolute silence. During that time, he melted the sand and polished it with inhuman patience until forging an immense glass lens perfectly convex. At noon on the 8th day, when the sun at its zenith punished the earth with its maximum ferocity, the old man placed the giant lens in front of the obsidian gate. "Look, my lord," the old man whispered. The immense sunlight, which fell over the entire valley heating stones and dust, was caught by the crystal. It forced the rays. The lens forced the millions of scattered rays to bend, to renounce their freedom, and to converge on a single, microscopic, and unbearable point of white light on the center of the black gate. There were no blows. There were no screams. There were no rams. Only a deathly silence. After a few minutes, the bronze began to glow red. Then it turned white. A column of thick smoke rose in the air, and the unbreakable metal which had resisted the onslaught of 10,000 men for months began to melt as if it were warm wax. The point of light cut the main bolt with the precision of a god's sword, and the heavy leaves of the gate swung wide open with a crash. The old man turned to the chieftain, whose eyes were wide with terror and wonder, and sentenced, "The gate did not yield to the sun. The sun was always there. The gate yielded to the annihilation of dispersion. The power was in the focus of the rays. The strength was in the unification of the light into one single lethal point." 2. The plague of the fragmented mind. You find yourself every day in front of the obsidian gates of your own destiny. The financial empire, the spiritual mastery, or the unshakable peace you demand are heavy and cold gates that will not yield to the tantrums of a child. And yet, you attack the gate exactly like the inertial army. You use brute force and anger. You wake up in the morning, you try to push your projects, but your mind is an undisciplined army that attacks in 10,000 different directions. You desire absolute opulence, but deep in your mind, you harbor a secret fear of losing your friends if you become powerful. You desire iron health, but your subconscious craves poison. You desire the peace of the king, but you spend hours submerged in the cheap intrigues of the plebeians and in the hatred toward your adversaries. Each of those contradictory desires is a sunbeam that escapes the lens. It is a soldier of your army who deserts to fight in another battle that does not belong to you. It is a waste. The tragedy of the fragmented mind is the pain of useless wear. You work 14 hours a day, you suffer, you read occult treatises, you perform rituals in the silence of the night, and when you look at the results, you discover the gate has not moved. Life seems unfair and the universe seems deaf, but the universe is not deaf. The universe is simply experiencing your vibration as a lukewarm and diffuse heat. There is no clear command. You demand wealth on one side, but you demand the comfort of victimhood on the other. Upon receiving 100 contradictory orders at the same time, the ether is paralyzed and executes none. You remain exactly where you are. The ordinary mind is a mirror broken into 1,000 pieces. It reflects light in 1,000 directions, dazzling the sight, but being absolutely incapable of lighting a single fire. To move the world, you must first mend the mirror and unify the reflection. You must become the lens that turns the diffuse light into a burning laser. Thirst the hidden nature of the iron will. To melt the perfect crystal, you must first demolish the lie they have taught you about the nature of the will. They have conditioned you to believe that willpower is an act of muscular resistance. They have told you that having will is rejecting vice by clenching your fists, suffering from deprivation, and fighting against temptation. They have told you that will is aggressive stubbornness. In the architecture of high-level magic, fighting an idea is the fastest way to become enslaved by it. The true iron will has absolutely nothing to do with effort, suffering, or muscular tension. The will, the only one recognized by the cosmos, is the capacity for absolute exclusion. To have will is the silent, icy, and lethal ability to fix the attention of your mind on a single image, on a single mandate, on a single decree of greatness, and to allow all other ideas to starve to death around it for lack of attention. The sovereign does not fight his fears. He simply withdraws his gaze from them. He ignores them. He does not debate with laziness. He ignores it with the same coldness with which he would ignore a crushed insect on the road. He does not push the door with his shoulders, he simply holds the lens in its place without his pulse trembling, allowing the unified ray to do the work of piercing matter. Force resides in the deep stillness. Potency resides in the singularity of focus. When a man manages to concentrate 100% of his vital force on a single point, excluding the past, the future, fears and doubts, he becomes an anomaly in the fabric of space and time. He becomes a god incarnate. The world has no choice but to melt before his absolute presence. For the crucible of attention, the forging of the laser. Reaching this state of absolute fixation is not a gift of fate. It is an art that requires an ascetic cruelty toward oneself. It requires the forge of the crucible. For your mind to stop being the lamp that weakly illuminates the whole room and become the ray that cuts steel, you must subject your ego to a torture of immobility. The ego is a scared monkey addicted to novelty. It jumps from branch to branch, looking for problems to solve, dramas to intervene in, and ephemeral pleasures to consume. When you order your mind to fix on a single point, the monkey will scream. It will send you painful memories, physical itches, and remind you of pending debts. It will try to convince you that meditating in silence is a waste of time. You must apply the jailer's rigor. Sit in the gloom. Fix your mind on the exact center of your chest, or visualize the throne of your consummated empire. And when the first foreign thought tries to sneak into the chamber, do not get angry with it at all. Anger is another distraction. Simply, with the movement of a silent guillotine, decapitate the thought. Gently move the light of your attention back to the throne. 100 times the monkey will escape, and 100 times, with a cold and terrifying patience, you will drag it back by the neck. You must be relentless in this. At first, this exercise will cause you deep psychic pain. Your mind, used to the hemorrhage of dispersion, will feel suffocated by being forced to condense. You will feel the visceral urge to move, to open your eyes, to abandon the forge. If you yield, the crystal will break and you will remain the slave of the desert forever. But if you resist, if you endure the extreme pressure of maintaining a single thought in the absolute vacuum of your consciousness, something miraculous will happen in the depths of your neurons. The friction will disappear. The thundering noise of your inner civil war will turn off at once. You will feel the majesty. You will experience the majestical immobility. Your mind will align. There will no longer be 10,000 voices whispering weaknesses. There will be only one, deep, grave, and omnipotent voice. You will have forged the unified ray. Now you are no longer a man with a mind, you are a mind with a man. You are ready to pierce the world. Fee the piercing of the ether and the collapse of circumstances. When the initiate manages to enter the physical world carrying this state of laser concentration, the ordinary laws of probability and human resistance collapse before him. The ordinary man enters a business room with his fragmented mind. He is thinking about dinner, fear of loss and debt. His energy is weak and blurry. The ether does not register his passage. The sovereign, armed with the unified ray, crosses the same threshold. He has emptied his mind of everything that is not the final result. There are no doubts, no alternatives, no escape plans. His intention is a pillar of incandescent iron. All psychic energy is condensed in his will. The impact on the etheric ocean is brutal. Since there are no contradictory thoughts to dilute the signal, the command the sovereign emits travels with a radioactive purity. The resistance of the material world, represented by opponents and bureaucracies, is thick and dark like the obsidian door. But it cannot stop the light. The obsidian door cannot stop the condensed light. The people around him feel an invisible pressure, a psychological heat that forces them to lower their gaze. The doubts of the adversaries melt. The barriers dissolve. Reality is subjected to such extreme heat that events melt and rearrange to fit the exact mold of the mind. And all of this occurs in a disturbing state of grace and silence. The sovereign does not need to argue, nor raise his voice, nor hit the table. He simply holds the lens with a pulse of ice, watching how the black gate of the world melts under the weight of his absolute attention. He is the sun focused through the crystal. Vi the death of alternatives, the power of no. To keep the unified ray sharp, you must become the relentless assassin of alternatives. The inertial man takes pride in having backup plans. He believes that having 5 options open is a sign of intelligence and security. In occultism, the backup plan is the fissure through which magic bleeds out. It is a sign of weakness. It is the secret confession before the court of the universe that you do not believe in your own victory. If you have a plan B, the universe will execute plan B because it knows your plan A lacks the gravitational weight of absolute faith. The forging of the iron will demand the burning of the ships. You must eliminate all. You have to eliminate distractions, false securities, and lukewarm relationships. You have to master the destructive power of the most sacred word in the language, no. You must say no to the mediocre pleasures that divert your gaze. You must say no to the golden opportunities that do not point directly to your obsession. A unified ray does not stop to warm the stones on the path. It goes exclusively to the center of the lock. Every time you say no to a dispersion, you are tightening the lens even more. You are sacrificing breadth to gain penetration. Your social circle may turn to ashes. You may become a fanatic to the eyes of the lukewarm. They may call you crazy for your monastic obsession. Do not apologize. The madness of the king is the sanity of the gods. They prefer the lukewarmness that burns no one. You have chosen the white fire that melts crowns. The cost of a unified mind is the death of all other lives you could have lived. Pay it gladly. Sev, the walk of the unified sovereign. Stop the civil war of your thoughts right now. Gather the deserters of your mind. Contemplate the pathetic dispersion with which you have lived until today. Measure the oceans of energy you have spilled in useless anxieties, in phantom debates inside your own head, and in the pursuit of 100 hares at the same time. Feel the necessary disgust for that weakness and tear it from your system. Clean the crystal of your mind. Polish the lens until there is not a single spot of doubt, nor a scratch of fear, nor a shadow of victimhood left on it. Choose the objective. Not 3, not 5, only 1. The most colossal and sacred objective. Choose the one most worthy of your lineage and your destiny. Raise the lens in front of your soul and allow yourself to catch all the light of your existence. Exclude the rest of the world. Exclude time. Exclude the possibility of defeat. Point the unified ray directly at the heart of your greatest obstacle and stay still. Point it and stay absolutely still. Do not push. Do not exert yourself. Hold the gaze without blinking. Watch as the world begins to warp and smoke under the pressure of your focus. You are the lens, you are the light, and you are the fire. The gate is already melting. Walk through the ashes of what once stood in your way. Conclusion: the awakening of the architect. The journey has concluded. In a few moments, the sound of this voice will be extinguished, and silence will once again reclaim the room in which you find yourself. The words that have flooded your mind throughout this journey, the ancient laws, the secrets of the ether, and the keys to mental transmutation will cease to vibrate in the air. They will cease to vibrate in order to settle, definitively and irrevocably, in the blood that runs through your veins. You have walked through the flames of forbidden knowledge. You have been stripped of your old beggar's garments and have contemplated, naked and in the stillness of your own abyss, the hidden gears that move the strings. They move the strings of destiny. You have learned to seal your lips, to disconnect from the ghosts that devour the multitudes, to govern the pendulum of fatality, and to condense the unified ray of your supreme will. But before silence seals this predestined encounter, you must listen to one last and ruthless warning for your own spirit. The abyss that separates the undeniable sage from the instructed fool is not found in the amount of secrets that both know, but in what both are willing to execute in the world of matter once the truth has been revealed to them. There is a terminal illness that haunts men at the end of this path, spiritual gluttony. It is a trap of the ego. The weak seeker falls in love with the search itself. He reads one grimoire after another, listens to infinite doctrines, accumulates scrolls, and gets drunk debating philosophies in the squares. He sits comfortably in the stands to contemplate the arena, deceiving himself by believing that knowing the path is the same as walking it with courage. This man becomes a walking library, but his bank account remains empty, his health withers, his bed is cold, and his life lacks an empire. The sovereign abhors sterile theory. The true alchemist demands relentless materialization. Close the books. Turn off the external voices. There are no more excuses to seek in the temples or secrets to wait. Everything you need to bend reality, curve destiny, and subject existence to your will already beats with lethal fury in the exact center of your chest. Understand once and for all the supreme purpose of this power. You have not been given the keys of manifestation to isolate yourself in a cave to admire your own reflection. Power is life. True power demands to be embodied in the weight of flesh, gold, and stone. Your duty is to erect a physical kingdom, an impregnable refuge of wealth and nobility, and you will not do it out of simple selfish vanity, but to forge an eternal heritage. You will do it to protect your own, to crown the queen who walks by your side for honor. You will do it to raise a shield of opulence, liberty, and honor around those two unique and pure new souls who carry your blood, guaranteeing that your descendants never have to kneel before the miseries of the ordinary world. Greatness demands that you impose your vision on the geography of this earth, no matter where you breathe today. Whether your throne must rise on a sunny island caressed by the seas, or your steps must resonate with authority in the ancient continents of stone and snow, the laws of the ether will obey you with the same blind submission. The universe recognizes no borders. It only recognizes the gravitational weight of the man who has ceased to doubt. The fold of the masses has been left behind forever. The hysterical lamentations are over. The submission to circumstances is over. The begging for opportunities at the crossroads of life is over. From this second on, you assume your place as the primary cause of your own experience. You are the architect, the builder, and the judge. Leave your chamber and enter the arena of the physical world. Go and reclaim without apology the empire you left abandoned while you slept. Love with an immensity that terrifies cowards. Forge your wealth by sliding the knife through the empty spaces of resistance. Lead your destiny in the strictest and most absolute of silences. Keep walking under the shadows, oblivious to the deafening noise of the blind, tracing with each of your acts a true and indelible path of knowledge. For those few who are worthy of following you, the fire has been delivered, the forge is lit. Raise your head, open the jaws of your supreme ambition, and allow the world to step back. Allow the entire world to retreat before your step. Your reign has just begun. The shadows have served their purpose, and the light you now carry is not to be hidden, but to be used as a tool of creation. Go forth, sovereign of the Octave, and build that which time cannot touch. The work is ready, the architect is finally awake.